Chapter 1155. Xiao Ziqing's attention was soon attracted by the low sobbing sounds upstairs. Xiao Ziqing heard the noise and walked over. When Yu Lily heard the movement, she quickly wiped her face and stood up. Xiao Ziqing happened to see Yu Lily squatting by the wall and sobbing. She looked at her face, which had turned pink from all the crying, and frowned. "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" "I'm fine." Yu Lily wiped her face and forced a smile. "Auntie, Oming might not be in a good mood. Can I stay here? Stay outside?" Xiao Ziqing frowned. When she saw Yu Lily's request, she felt even more uncomfortable. What did that mean? Can I stay here? Does that mean that Yu Lily is worried that I won't even let her stay in the corner? Xiao Ziqing understood what was going on and felt extremely displeased. Xiao Ziqing gave Yu Lily a look. She didn't object or agree. She walked toward Oming's room. He gently knocked on the door and shouted, "Son, are you inside? Open the door." There was no immediate response from inside. Yu Lily was also looking forward to the person inside to reply. After about 10 seconds, Oming said, "Mom, I'll be alone for a while. Don't come in." "Are you in a bad mood? Why don't you tell Mommy about it? Maybe she'll be in a better mood." Xiao Ziqing was clearly unwilling to give up. One had to know that she had scolded this woman several times. Every time, she didn't get any benefit from it. But now, Oming could make this stubborn girl cry like this. What had he done? Furthermore, Oming was usually so protective of this woman. How could he bear to let her cry like this? There's something wrong with him. "It's okay. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep," Oming said. His voice was a little gloomy. Other than being in a bad mood, there was no other emotion in his voice. When Xiao Ziqing heard that, she had no choice but to give up. She turned to look at Yu Lily and said, "Come down and talk." Yu Lily looked at Xiao Ziqing and felt a little uneasy. When they went downstairs, Xiao Ziqing made a cup of tea for Yu Lily and asked, "Did you quarrel with Oming?" She took the tea and shook her head. "What's going on?" Yu Lily also wanted to ask what was going on. Even Yu Lily couldn't figure out why Oming had suddenly treated her that way. The tears that she had suppressed with great difficulty suddenly gushed out again. Yu Lily took a deep breath and tried to make herself look refreshed. She said, "It's probably because Oming wants to be alone for a while. He's in a bad mood, but thankfully he just finished eating." When Xiao Ziqing saw Yu Lily in this state, no matter how much she disliked her, she couldn't help feeling a little sad. She looked at Yu Lily with disdain and said, "Why are you crying when you're so ugly? My son isn't dead yet. Since my son has chased you out, you should go back first. When he comes looking for you again, I'll call you over." Yu Lily looked at Xiao Ziqing and said, "What are you crying for when you're so ugly?" When Yu Lily heard that, she panicked and said, "Auntie, Oming is only temporarily in a bad mood. He'll be fine when he's in a better mood. Can I sit here for a while?" Xiao Ziqing didn't say anything. Yu Lily quickly added, "If you think I'm taking up space, I can go to Oming's door. That way, I can hear him whenever he calls out to me." Chapter 1156. Yu Lily quickly got up and went to Oming's door without even taking a sip of tea. Xiao Ziqing just glanced at her and went out on her own. However, Yu Lily stayed there for more than an hour. During this time, Oming didn't come out. Yu Lily stood at the door, her mind blank. Suddenly, her phone vibrated and rang. It was a text message. Yu Lily opened the text message. It was from Oming. A text message from Oming? A string of numbers. 985454966363367468222. What does it mean? Yu Lily looked at it for a long time, but she didn't know what it meant. She called Oming. Through the door, she heard the ringtone. It was very soft. Yu Lily listened to the ringtone, waiting for Oming to pick up. But no matter how many times she called, Oming didn't pick up. Feeling a little frustrated, Yu Lily stood in the same place and didn't move. All of a sudden the door opened. Yu Lily was happy. She was about to go up and call him. But then she immediately shut her mouth and didn't dare to move. What does he want to do? Oming walked out and shouted, "Mom, next time Yu Lily comes, don't let her in." Yu Lily's heart jumped when she heard that. What does Oming mean? Don't let her in? Then who was it that had been sticking to her these past few days, wanting her to accompany him? Oming didn't seem to notice that there was another person not far away. He shouted, "Mom, are you there?" No one answered. Oming turned and walked back in. Just as he was about to close the door, Lily went up and pushed the door open. Oming paused and said, "You haven't left yet?" "Why? What do you mean by asking your mom not to let me in? Didn't you hear it? Why are you asking?" Oming pretended to close the door. Although his eyes were empty and his arm was in a cast, his strength was no less than Lily's. "Why, Oming, what do you mean? I just sent you a message. Didn't you see it?" "A message?" Lily was stunned and thought of the pile of numbers. It was highly likely that Oming had pressed the wrong key and changed the keyboard to numeric. Oming responded calmly. He didn't feel that anything was wrong. Lily didn't dare say that he had actually sent a bunch of numbers. She played dumb and said, "I didn't look at it. I'll check it out later." Oming was used to typing 9 on his phone's keyboard. Lily only needed to type the numbers to know what they meant. "Then you can go back first." Oming slammed the door hard, but he couldn't close it. Lily used all her strength to resist and shouted, "Why are you chasing me away? Did I do something wrong?" "You didn't do anything wrong. I was the one who was wrong," Oming thought to himself, but he couldn't say it out loud. "Or, did I say something that made you unhappy? Tell me, okay? Why are you suddenly in a bad mood? Why are you suddenly chasing me away? Oming, you're already like this. Don't be angry with me, okay? What do you mean I'm already like this?" Oming loosened his grip, and his face darkened. "I'm disabled and blind, so I don't even have the right to be angry, right?" "No," Lily said. "Then what do you mean? Do you think that I should beg you to be with me? I don't care. Lily, go away. I don't want to see or hear you." Oming's face was only gloomy and emotionless. Lily looked at him and knew that his mood must be terrible. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said such things. Chapter 1157. Lily stopped moving, but she did not retreat. Looking at Oming in front of her, Lily's eyes were filled with compassion and regret that Oming couldn't see. "Oming, it's not that you begged me to be with you, but that I can't leave you. Have you forgotten what I said? I must marry you, and you must marry me, isn't that right?" Lily took a step forward and grabbed his hand. In her voice, there was a bit of pleading. "You promised me. Do you want to break your promise now? I know you are in a bad mood, but don't say such things in the future, okay?" Although she knew that he was unhappy because of his misfortune, hearing such words still made Lily's heart hurt. It hurt a lot. Such a feeling was more hurtful than any of Qiao Ziqing's words. The pain of a lover was far deeper, more turbulent, and more painful than that of an unrelated person. Oming clearly felt the emotions coming from Lily. He held her with his hand, and his chest was slightly trembling. Why would he want to say something like that? But when he thought of the possibility that he would never recover his eyesight, and Qiao Ziqing's deep misunderstanding of him and Lily, Oming's heart was indescribably sad. Oming pushed her away with a backhand. He didn't say anything, but his hand was very strong. Lily was caught off guard when she was pushed. He slammed the door shut and locked it from the inside. "Oming, open the door." Lily was inexplicably flustered. Everything was fine just now. What suddenly happened? Didn't he eat when they first arrived? Why did he suddenly change? Lily slammed the door and shouted, "Oming, open the door. Tell me clearly, what do you mean? Does it mean that he doesn't want to marry me? Does it mean that he doesn't want to answer? Why didn't he say it clearly?" Lily didn't understand, but looking at the tightly closed door in front of her, the panic in her heart became more and more rampant. "Go and check the message. In the future, let's not see each other." Oming's words came through the door. It was muffled but very clear. Lily heard his words clearly. She quickly picked up the phone and looked at the string of numbers. She typed it out according to the numbers. 9 key pinyin 9854456636336746822. After Lily punched out, her heart was even more shocked. "Lily, let's break up. Sender, Bicho, go take a look at the messages. In the future, let's not meet again." What Oming had just said rang in her mind. Lily held the phone and looked at the words that automatically came to mind. She couldn't believe it. How could this be? How could this be? Ming told her to break up. How could this be? How could this be? Ming, what do you mean by this? I don't understand. Open the door and explain it to me. Open the door. What do you mean? Ming, what do you mean by this? Come out and explain it to me. Open the door. Open the door. Ming's voice trembled a little, and he slammed the door even harder. However, no matter how hard she shouted or how loud she shouted, the person inside did not move. Ming sat on the ground and leaned against the wall. He could clearly feel the coldness from his back. Chapter 1158. She saw it, and she understood it. That's all right. Ming got up from the ground, walked to the bed and slowly sat down. Outside, Lily's voice was getting louder and louder. At the same time, it was getting crazier and more hysterical. In the end, the sound of Lily hitting the door was getting softer and softer, and the original voice had collapsed into sobs. Ming leaned against the bed and bit his lower lip, trying not to make a sound. Tears flowed down from the corner of his eyes, and the salty taste, with the smell of weakness, was so strong that it was embarrassing. That's it. Ming's head was getting dizzier, and he fell asleep on the bed. Even Ming himself didn't know how long he had been sleeping, because he couldn't see. He couldn't even tell the difference between day and night. Standing up, Ming felt a throbbing pain in his arm. Gently stroking it, Ming stood up and opened the door. Outside it was quiet. Lily was gone. In order to be able to see Lily at any time, Shunjilia took the old lady to a coffee shop downstairs in the neighborhood where Lily lived. People could be seen coming and going at any time. Kingstown was a first-tier city. Basically, at this time of the year, the whole city could be called an empty city. Old Mrs. Shun leaned on the table and stared outside, for fear of missing Lily's arrival. Shunjilia sat opposite the old lady, playing a game on his phone. The killing game kept coming, and Shunjilia was very excited. Suddenly, the old lady stood up and shouted, Lily is back! With that, she didn't give Shunjilia any time to recover from his shock. She quickly ran out of the room. Shunjilia quickly turned off the game, caught up with her and shouted, Grandma, Lily won't come back at this time. You'd better sit here quietly. When Lily comes back, maybe she'll think you've done a good job and spend more time with you alone. However, Shunjilia's words didn't work. The old lady walked faster like an old child and happily shouted, Lily, you're back? Lily hadn't expected the old lady to appear in front of her so quickly. She rubbed her eyes and tried her best to look natural as she asked, Old Mrs. Shun, what are you doing here? When old Mrs. Shun heard this form of address, she was unhappy and said, What old lady? Can you call me Grandma? I've been waiting for you here for a long time. Shall we go eat Thai food now? You guys didn't eat lunch? No, Shunjilia replied. He sounded a little helpless. Grandma said that she had to wait for you to go with her. So we settled around here in the afternoon. As he spoke, he noticed that Lily's eyes were visibly red and swollen. Shunjilia wasn't the only one who saw through it. Even old Mrs. Shun, who had always behaved like a child in front of Lily, acted as if she hadn't seen it. She walked up to Lily affectionately and took her arm. Shall we go now? Old Mrs. Shun was pleasantly surprised. He knew Lily would come back, but he didn't know it would be so early. But at the same time, he did not expect Lily to come back in such a state. The old man's heart ached. After all, she had lived for decades. Old Mrs. Shun could roughly guess the reason for Lily's current state. Chapter 1159. Lily nodded as the old lady held her arm affectionately. His red and swollen eyes looked a little miserable at this moment. Lily reached out to press her eyes, but old Mrs. Shun pulled her hand away. She rebuked, You can't rub your eyes if they are uncomfortable. The more you rub them, the more uncomfortable they will be. It's better to wear glasses when the wind is strong. As he spoke, he slowly stretched out his hand toward Shunjilia and said, Old man, glasses. Shunjilia hurriedly took out a pair of sunglasses from the bag he was carrying, arched his back, and jumped onto it with small steps. In a shrill voice he said, Your Highness, the glasses have arrived. His appearance was extremely comical. Old Mrs. Shun laughed and took the glasses. When she looked at Lily, She realized that she wasn't smiling like she was. Here, this is for you. Old Mrs. Shun pushed it toward Eulily. Put it on. It'll protect you from the wind. Eulily's heart warmed. She didn't even have to look to know that her eyes were swollen. She didn't stand on ceremony. She took the glasses from old Mrs. Shun and thanked her before leading old Mrs. Shun and Shinjilia toward the mall ahead. When they arrived at the Thai restaurant, a girl in traditional Thai clothes came out to welcome the guests. She put her palms together and said to them, Savadika. Old Mrs. Shun also bowed to her and said, Sawadika. Even the waitress couldn't help but laugh as she led them into a private room. After ordering, old Mrs. Shun looked a little excited. She looked at Eulily and said, Lily, this is the first time I've been to a Thai restaurant in Kingstown. I heard that Kingstown is close to Thailand. Why don't we go to Thailand together? When Shinjilia heard that, he couldn't help but make things difficult for her. He coughed lightly and said, Grandma, we didn't bring our passports. Ask your brother to send it over. The delivery service is not open. When the old lady heard that, she was displeased. She turned to glare at Shinjilia and said, Go back and get it. I'll wait for you in Kingstown. That's not a good idea. You'll fall apart if you keep running around. Shinjilia exclaimed. I don't care. In any case, I'm going to Thailand with Lily. Hurry up and get me my passport. Old Mrs. Shun had her arms akimbo. She was being unreasonable. Who asked you to be my grandson? Shinjilia was speechless. Are you sure this isn't a curse? But when he thought about it carefully, it didn't seem to be wrong. Shinjilia frowned. But when he turned his head, he saw that Eulily's lips were slightly raised. Shinjilia felt slightly relieved, but then he said unhappily, Even if I'm your grandson, you can't mistreat me like this. Am I still your biological son? I didn't give birth to you in the first place. The old lady didn't find anything wrong with that. She looked at Eulily and asked, Lily, do you want to go? If they went, the youngest would go to the capital. The journey there would take 3 hours, and the round trip would only take 6 hours. Even if he takes 3 hours to travel to and from the airport, that's only 9 hours. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon now, so he should be back by midnight. When Shinjilia heard that, he exploded and yelled, Grandma. My dear Grandma, are you trying to kill your grandson? What, you don't want to go? I don't want to, of course I don't. Such an arduous task was not something that just anyone could accomplish. But Chapter 1160. It doesn't matter. Leave it to me. You can go. Eulily's lips curled up slightly, but her sunglasses were still on. Seeing the smile on Eulily's face, Shinjilia and old Mrs. Shun both breathed a sigh of relief. Shinjilia immediately pretended to be unhappy and shouted, Hey, my grandmother is bullying me, and you're bullying me too, right? What? Old Mrs. Shun glared at him. Call me Eulily. Shinjilia turned his head and shrank his neck when he heard the old lady's words. He picked up his glass and took a sip. Seeing Shinjilia's behavior, Eulily's smile became even wider. An indescribable feeling spread through her. Her heart felt warm, but it also felt like a feather was gently tickling it. It was so comfortable that she couldn't help but want to reject it. This was the first time she had eaten with someone other than Oming and her colleagues, especially on such a special day. It was a wonderful feeling. The dishes were quickly served, and old Mrs. Shun quickly began to eat. Although old Mrs. Shun was not young, her appetite was still very good. Eulily had eaten not long ago, but she didn't eat much. Shinjilia had also eaten most of the food for old Mrs. Shun. This was after Shinjilia had stopped her several times. Otherwise, Eulily would have suspected that the old lady would have eaten even more. After eating, Shinjilia paid the bill. Old Mrs. Shun had accidentally eaten too much and needed a walk to digest her food. She took Eulily with her and walked around the mall. Big malls didn't close during the New Year, so there were still a lot of things to shop. However, the New Year still had the atmosphere of the New Year. The same song Winter Jasmine was played everywhere. As he walked with the old lady, she became more and more interested in the song. She even shouted at the top of her lungs, Love a winter jasmine, flowers bloom everywhere. Many shop assistants looked over, and Shinjilia quickly hid in the side. Eulily was pulled by the old lady and shouted at the top of her lungs, As she walked, she turned to look at Lily with a big smile on her face. Shunjilia covered his face and hid in the side. When he looked over, he found that Lily was also smiling at his grandmother. It seemed that she was no longer as impatient as she was at noon. Shunjilia's heart calmed down a little, and there was a look of relief in his eyes. Although he didn't know why his grandmother liked Lily so much, he had to admit that Lily was a very good girl. It was a pity for such a girl to be with a scumbag like Oming. Old Mrs. Shin sang loudly all the way. Many people watched her as she pulled Lily along. Suddenly, the old lady stopped and turned to look at Shunjilia. She shouted, "Shunjilia, why are you hiding so far away? Is it embarrassing for Grandma?" Shunjilia was stunned. He quickly covered his face as everyone looked at him. He groaned in his heart. "Oh my God. Just call him, but don't call him by his name, okay? His illustrious name." Shunjilia smiled sheepishly and said, "I'm paving the way. Paving the way." With that, he ran off like a wisp of smoke. Old Mrs. Shun glared at him. She grabbed Lily's hand and chased after Shunjilia. She shouted, "Stop right there." Chapter 1161. When old Mrs. Shun heard that, she felt a little proud. When she turned to look at Lily, her eyes were full of pride. "Am I very powerful?" Lily pursed her lips and nodded. "Very powerful." Old Mrs. Shun was even more proud. She laughed and chased after Shunjilia. Shunjilia, who was in front, was secretly shocked. He shouted, "Grandma, slow down. Do you want to die?" When old Mrs. Shun heard that, she was unhappy and shouted, "What do you mean?" Shunjilia cried bitterly in his heart, and his expression immediately changed. With an apologetic look on his face, he stepped forward and said, "Grandma, I was wrong." Old Mrs. Shun glared at him and reached out to pull his ear up. "What did you do wrong?" "Everything is wrong." Shunjilia admitted defeat. Especially after seeing Lily's faint smile, he became even more terrified. He cried out in pain, "It hurts, it hurts." More and more people were watching. Shunjilia covered his face in shame. "Aha! Grandma, let's go. I'll take you somewhere else to play." Lily removed old Mrs. Shun's hand. After helping Shunjilia out, she took the old lady's hand and walked forward. When old Mrs. Shun heard that, she was very happy. She nodded and took Lily's arm affectionately. She strode forward. Just like that, a few hours passed. Although old Mrs. Shun was physically strong, she was old. At about 7 or 8 o'clock, Shunjilia forced the old lady to go back. Naturally, the old lady was very reluctant. In the end, Lily persuaded her to go back. Shunjilia and the old lady took Lily to the hotel. It was a famous 5-star hotel in Kingstown. Shunjilia had booked a suite with 2 rooms. Just as Shunjilia asked the old lady to take a shower, old Mrs. Shun seemed to be afraid that Lily would go back on her word. She hugged Lily's arm and said with a pair of old eyes, "Lily, you said you would sleep with me tonight." Lily smiled and said, "Well, I won't go back on my word." Old Mrs. Shun was relieved and went to take a shower. However, Lily didn't bring any clothes. She was temporarily wearing a hotel bathrobe. When he came out, the old lady was sitting on the bed, holding a tablet and playing a popular game. It was simple yet not so simple, comparable to Tetris. Lily leaned over to take a look. Old Mrs. Shun extended the tablet toward her and said, "Come on, let's play together." Lily chuckled and pushed it back. She looked at old Mrs. Shun, deliberated over her words, and said, "Actually, Grandma, I wanted to ask you from the very beginning. Can you answer this question for me?" "What?" Old Mrs. Shun lowered her head and blinked at Lily. Lily felt that the old man was a little cute and asked, "Why do you like me so much? My attitude toward you has never been very friendly." "You saved me," old Mrs. Shun said without hesitation. She looked at Lily and said mysteriously, "To tell you the truth, I can see a person's fortune. Luck." Chapter 1162. Ever since our old man died, I feel like I've become half a god. When I look at others, if I get along well with them, I can see a layer of fog above their heads. As old Mrs. Shun spoke, she looked at the top of Lily's head. Above everyone's head, there will be a ball of luck that belongs to them. Within this ball of luck, There will be bad luck, good luck, and bad luck. There will always be many storms in one's life, and only in the end can one comfortably welcome the rainbow. Old Mrs. Shun had a smile on her face, but at that moment, she looked different from how she had looked during the day. She was kind, and the wrinkles on her face folded up. She reached out and gently patted her hand. From the first time I saw you, I knew that you were destined to be with me. Lily, your luck compliments mine. When I first saw you, I felt that you were very likely to be my long-lost granddaughter. Lily blushed with shame. She smiled and asked, "Isn't it Shinmanting? That child was also destined to be with our family. As for what kind of fate, I couldn't tell, so I simply brought her home. Who knew she would have such a fate with Shun Luoan? What a sin." Although that was what she said, old Mrs. Shun wasn't really that angry. She had expected it, so it was normal for there to be some discrepancies. The Shun family was also a prestigious family in the capital. Shun Manting was an orphan. Given such an opportunity to climb the social ladder, she did not hesitate to follow her, and even became friends with her. She had thought that Lily would be easy to deal with. Who knew that this girl would hate her so much? Lily's attitude was far beyond old Mrs. Shun's expectations. Her desire to bring her home was aroused. However, it was also during this time that she became more aware of Lily's extraordinary qualities. This girl's life was like a spring. The more pain she could endure, the more happiness she could obtain. The more she was suppressed now, the more she would rebound in the future. In the past, her life was cheap, and in the future, it would be priceless. I don't match your lost granddaughter's age. I don't think It can't be that granddaughter, right? Rumor had it that old Mrs. Shun was very harsh toward Yi Qianqian's younger sister. If she really became their granddaughter, would she? Old Mrs. Shun didn't notice Lily's worry. She patted her hand and said, "You and I are fated. Regardless of whether we are related by blood or not, I am willing to be friends with you." As she spoke, she quietly looked around and whispered, "Lily, what do you think of our grandson?" This grandson was, of course, referring to Shinjilia. Lily was speechless. Thinking of Shinjilia's sloppy appearance, she shook her head and said, "Grandma, don't try to match me up. I'm not interested in Shinjilia." "What a pity." Old Mrs. Shun patted her hand. "I really don't know what's so good about that guy. You like him, and my disappointing granddaughter insisted on marrying him. Now I heard that he got into a car accident. What's his situation now?" Hearing that, Lily's eyes dimmed slightly. "Is it serious?" When he saw Lily in the afternoon, she seemed to be crying a lot. From the look of it, he could tell that Ken was seriously injured. Chapter 1163. After old Mrs. Shun said that, she felt like she had asked too many questions. She couldn't even see. Of course it was serious. It will all pass. That boy is also a blessed man. Lily forced a smile and didn't say anything. The old lady had played the whole day and taken a plane here. She was already very tired. At that moment, she didn't talk to Lily and fell asleep unknowingly. The old lady had a regular schedule. She woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning. When she woke up, Lily was sleeping soundly. Her face was buried under her arms, and her hair covered most of her face. The old lady turned to look at Lily. She looked at Lily's slightly curled up sleeping position. At that moment, she was curled up in the corner of the bed, looking like a child who lacked a sense of security. It was also at that moment that the old lady strongly remembered that she was an orphan who grew up without parents, an orphan who was abandoned when she was born, an orphan who couldn't find her parents. The feeling of loneliness could be felt from her sleeping position. The old lady had never been an emotional person, but at that moment, when she felt this inexplicable atmosphere, she couldn't help but feel a lump in her throat. The old lady looked at Lily for a while. Suddenly, she opened her eyes with a thump. Seeing that old Mrs. Shun was looking at her, Lily remembered where she was. She smiled and said, "Grandma, good morning." "Morning. Did you have a nightmare?" Old Mrs. Shun looked at her kindly. When she saw the tears on her face, her heart ached even more. She reached out and patted her gently on the arm with a slight smile on her face. Lily smiled and wiped the tears on her face. She climbed up and said, "Sort of. Yu Lily's eyes looked much more swollen than yesterday. Coupled with the dried water stains on her face, it wasn't difficult to imagine what kind of dream she had. What sad dream did you have? Tell me about it. Old Mrs. Shun's voice was soft and slow. It sounded full of love. At the same time, her old and dry hand had already gently touched the ends of Yu Lily's hair. The old lady in front of her was obviously old. Her back was slightly bent, and her face was layered with wrinkles. But at that moment, she gave Yu Lily the warmth of an elder that she had never felt before. Other than Oming, this was the first person who had spoken to her like this. Yu Lily felt a surge of anger in her chest, and she couldn't control it. Her throat was choked with pain, and tears flowed down. What's wrong? Old Mrs. Shun frowned, and looked at Yu Lily with sadness in her eyes. Yu Lily couldn't help but burst into tears. She gently hugged the old man, and smelled the unique smell of the old man's metabolism. A place in her heart that had been empty for many years suddenly seemed to be filled. Yu Lily was sobbing uncontrollably. Old Mrs. Shun stopped asking. She hugged her gently, and gave her silent comfort. Thank you, Grandma. Did Oming bully you? Old Mrs. Shun patted Yi Qianqian's back gently and said softly. It just so happens that Grandma hasn't visited them in a long time. Why don't you take Grandma over there and have a seat? Go to the O clan? Chapter 1164. Settle accounts. When Yu Lily heard those two words, her heart warmed again. This was the first time, other than Oming, that someone had said something like that. After being bullied outside, someone came back and said they would help you get revenge and settle accounts. What kind of relationship was that? Family? Family? None of them. But why was this old lady so nice to her? Was it just because she liked her? Yu Lily found it a little strange. When she heard that, she nodded her head. Coincidentally, she was going to look for Oming. If she went alone, Xiao Ziqing wouldn't even let her in. If she brought along the old lady who used to be their in-law, the outcome might be different. When the old lady saw that she had agreed, she was immediately happy. She got up and went to the bathroom to freshen up. Then they were ready to set off. When everything was ready, it was only a little after 7 o'clock. Shinjilia was still sleeping. Just as Yu Lily was thinking about whether or not to wake him up, the old lady gave her a look to tell her not to. It was 8 o'clock in the morning when they arrived at the O residence. It was old Mrs. Shun who rang the doorbell. Yu Lily hid in the corner, afraid that Xiao Ziqing wouldn't open the door if she saw her through the peephole. However, it wasn't Xiao Ziqing who opened the door. It was O Huijin. When O Huijin saw old Mrs. Shun, he was very surprised. He called out, "In-law Grandma, why are you here?" In-law Grandma. That was obviously a form of address that had been used since before. It hadn't changed. Old Mrs. Shun nodded her head and said, "I brought my granddaughter here to take a look." As she spoke, she looked at O Huijin and asked, "May I come in?" O Huijin quickly moved aside and said, "Please come in quickly. The weather is a little cold today. Why aren't you wearing more clothes? Your granddaughter is here too?" "My granddaughter, Shin Manting, is here too? The woman who caused the scandal with her brother? The ex-fiancé of my son? Yes, but she's not my biological granddaughter. I adopted her outside." Old Mrs. Shun looked at O Huijin confidently. O Huijin nodded his head. Shin Manting wasn't her biological granddaughter. Old Mrs. Shun had adopted her outside a few years ago. He wasn't the only one who knew that. Many people in the outside world knew. As he spoke, he looked behind the old lady and called out, "Manting is here too? Why don't you come in?" However, when old Mrs. Han heard O Huijin's shout, she felt unhappy and retorted, "Who told you it was Manting? I already said it wasn't her." O Huijin felt a little awkward. If it wasn't Shin Manting, who could it be? Old Mrs. Shin snorted and looked back. She realized that Yu Lily hadn't followed her in. That made old Mrs. Shun a little unhappy. She shouted, "Lily, what are you doing outside? Come on in." "Lily." When he said that, not only did O Huijin feel a little surprised, but even Xiao Ziqing, who had just walked out, was amazed. He subconsciously looked at the door, and sure enough, he saw a familiar figure walking in. Yu Lily. Yu Lily didn't seem to be in a good state today. She only had light makeup on, but it still couldn't hide the red and swollen eyes. It seemed that he was in a much more sorry state than he was yesterday. Chapter 1165. Xiao Ziqing and her husband looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. When did Yu Lily become the granddaughter of the Shen family? They hadn't heard anything about it before. Furthermore, Xiao Ziqing had heard a little about how difficult the old lady was to deal with. She had even heard that she had some mental problems. Her mind was often muddled, and she was always spouting nonsense. Furthermore, her mood was erratic and unpredictable. If you made her unhappy in any way, the old lady would flip out at the drop of a hat. Even Shen Manting was often at a loss for what to do with the old lady's erratic personality. How did Yu Lily end up with the old lady? Old Mrs. Shen ignored their astonishment. She turned around and walked over to Yu Lily. She held her arm affectionately and walked toward the living room of the O residence with a smile. Xiao Ziqing was even more stunned when she saw the scene. In the 4 years that Shen Manting had been engaged to Ming, the old lady had come over once or twice, but she had always brought her granddaughter in with the attitude of an elder to discuss marriage and other matters. She was stingy with a smile, let alone holding Shen Manting's hand as they walked in. How did Yu Lily deal with this old lady? Yu Lily felt goosebumps rise under Xiao Ziqing's stare. She looked up and smiled sheepishly. The old lady didn't care. Under the gaze of Xiao Ziqing and Huijin, she swaggered over to the sofa and sat down. Sister Yang, bring me the Jinjunmei tea that I brought back before the new year. Huijin shouted into the room. All right. Sister Yang quickly brought the tea over. The way she looked at Yu Lily was also a little strange. A few days ago, Sister Yang had been on leave and hadn't seen Yu Lily, but she was no stranger to the old lady. Now that she saw this unfamiliar granddaughter, she couldn't help but take a second look. Faced with all the strange gazes around her, Yu Lily felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. She felt a little uncomfortable. Everyone had their own thoughts. Xiao Ziqing sat down in front of them and handed old Mrs. Shen some snacks with a smile. She asked, "Why does Grandma have time to come over today? It's the new year. Is everything peaceful in the capital?" The implication was, "Your family still has a mess to deal with, so why did you come to my house?" Old Mrs. Shen had lived for a long time. How could she not understand? She snorted and said, "I heard that your son got into a car accident, so I asked my granddaughter to bring me here to take a look. After all, we used to be in-laws. I don't want people to say that I'm cold. I came here just to hang out with Lily, but I didn't even stop by to take a look." When Xiao Ziqing heard that, she looked at Yu Lily even more. Is he here to look for Yu Lily? In that case, Yu Lily and the old lady had known each other for a long time. Could it be that Yu Lily was not an orphan, but was somehow related to the Shen family? She glanced at Yu Lily, then at the old lady. She nodded her head without changing her expression. "Thank you for your concern, my dear grandmother. Where's your son?" Chapter 1166. When Yu Lily heard that, she knew that the words were directed at her. Looking down at the table, Yu Lily subconsciously clasped her hands together. He's eating well and sleeping soundly. He's in good shape. Shouldn't I be happy to hear that? But for some reason, Yu Lily felt an indescribable pain in her heart. So after breaking up with me, he will be in better shape? How is that possible? Yu Lily didn't believe it. But she saw Xiao Ziqing's relaxed expression. She didn't seem worried about her son at all. Instead, she looked very relaxed and happy. Old Mrs. Shen looked at her and said, "Is that so? That's great. I was worried that something would happen to your son. After all, the engagement between your family and mine hasn't been cancelled. In the future, our families will become in-laws. I don't want my granddaughter to marry a cripple." Her words were so direct that it was embarrassing. Yu Lily felt as if a knife had cut into her heart. In that moment, she suddenly felt that everything around her had nothing to do with her. The engagement between Shen Manting and Ming hasn't been cancelled. So their engagement hasn't been cancelled? After what happened between Shen Manting and Shen Luoan, their engagement hasn't been cancelled. Yu Lily found it hard to believe. But looking at the expressions of Xiao Ziqing and Huijin, she knew. It was true. Xiao Ziqing was a little embarrassed and said, "Grandma, how can you say that? Our son. Is your son really a cripple?" Old Mrs. Shun looked at her and asked sharply. Xiao Ziqing's words were stuck in her throat. She didn't know whether to say yes or no. Oming's condition was indeed not good. Not only was he blind, but his hand was also fractured. But how could his parents accept the word cripple? When Lily saw that, she quietly reached out and tugged on old Mrs. Shun's sleeve. In a low voice she said, "Grandma, Oming is fine." "What do you mean by fine? Is it really as you said? He can't see?" Old Mrs. Shun didn't have the slightest intention of hiding her voice. "Isn't he blind? What's the difference between that and a cripple? Our granddaughter can't marry someone like that." Old Mrs. Shun. A young man's voice came from the second floor. This voice was cold and displeased, and it made one's heart tremble. Lily's heart fluttered. She looked in the direction of the voice, and saw Oming in his pajamas. At that moment, Oming's hand was in a cast hanging from his neck. His eyes were looking straight ahead. He looked empty and lifeless like a puppet. "If you have come to see if I am crippled, you have seen it. I am blind and crippled, as you know. You may go back." As for Shun Manting, what gave her the confidence to believe that I would marry a woman like you, who has ruined our family's reputation? I, Oming, can't afford to be cuckolded by my brother. Lily hadn't said a word since she entered the house. Oming knew that old Mrs. Shun hadn't come alone. When he heard her call herself their granddaughter, he naturally assumed that the person who had come was Shun Manting. Chapter 1167. Please go back. It's the new year, and no one will be happy if things go sour. As she spoke, she groped her way downstairs. Such a scene was shocking to the eye. Xiao Ziqing immediately stood up and wanted to walk in Oming's direction, but she was one step too late. Lily's footsteps were fast as she ran in that direction. Oming couldn't see, but he could vaguely guess who it was from the sound of her footsteps. Just as Lily was about to reach him, Oming stopped. "Why are you here?" Oming asked. It was obvious that he had recognized Lily. Xiao Ziqing and Oh Huajin looked at each other and saw different emotions in each other's eyes. Old Mrs. Shun was still sitting on the sofa, drinking tea calmly. She looked at Lily on the second floor with a look of admiration in her eyes. Brave. Not bad. Lily didn't say anything. She walked up to him and grabbed his uninjured arm without a word and pulled him forward. Oming's footsteps were frozen in place. He didn't move an inch. "I thought I made it clear yesterday that we broke up. Lily, what's the point of doing this?" He didn't wait for Lily to speak before he turned to the side and shouted, "Mom, didn't we agree not to let her in?" Hearing that, Xiao Ziqing's heart was filled with doubt. Could Oming be serious? Oming didn't look like he was faking it. Why did he suddenly break up? Xiao Ziqing wasn't the only one who was curious. Even Lily herself was baffled. "Oming!" Lily shouted. "Why are you saying something like that for no reason? You have to give me a reason. I didn't meet you yesterday, so don't even think of escaping today. You have to give me an explanation, or I won't leave." Yes, for no reason. No one would be willing to accept such a situation. Even Oming himself wouldn't easily accept such a sudden breakup. Could he tell her that he had thought it through and didn't want to hold her up any longer? Could he tell her that he didn't want her to be a cripple for the rest of her life, and that she should find another way out and find another man? If he said that, Lily would be even more unwilling to break up with him. Oming knew her very well. Lily was a good girl, and it was precisely because of this that he could not delay her. It was very likely that he would be like this for the rest of his life, blind, forever in need of others to take care of him, unable to work, becoming a burden to his family and his parents, forever living in darkness, never to see the light of day. Furthermore, Xiao Ziqing's opinion of Lily was huge. It wasn't something that could be changed overnight. He couldn't afford it, and he didn't want Lily to compromise because of him. Hearing Lily's words, Oming's heart tightened. He wanted to pull his hand back, but Lily's hands were holding him tightly. Oming couldn't push her away with just one hand. He simply let her hug him and said coldly, "A man doesn't want a woman who is greedy for money and vanity. Isn't that a reason?" Lily felt a stab in her heart. She looked at Oming in disbelief. "Are you talking about me? Is there someone else besides you?" Chapter 1168. Lily's voice was filled with disbelief. She unconsciously loosened her grip on Ming. Ming took the opportunity to pull his hand back and said, "I'm denouncing my ex-girlfriend. She did all the hypocritical things she could. On the surface, she treated me impeccably, but in reality, she was willing to do anything to marry me. Outsiders must think that you're loyal, but do you think I don't know your true colors? You want to marry me? Then use all means to get a divorce and get a large share of the alimony, right?" The more Lily listened, the more unreasonable she found it. Such a reason, such a reason? Nonsense! Lily roared. Ming, you're crazy. What nonsense are you talking about? Do you think I care about your family's money? If you don't care, why won't you break up with me? If you don't care, why are you still pestering me? Ming retorted. His tone was urgent. My mother is right. Orphans like you are hypocritical. You grew up without parents, so you don't know anything about relationships. Xiao Ziqing was caught off guard. She was stunned. Huijin was equally baffled. No one had expected that in just a few days, the relationship between Ming and Lily would change so much. Apart from Ming himself, no one could understand what he meant. Lily's body trembled with anger. She looked at Ming, and even her breathing became rapid. Ming took advantage of the situation and said, "You were with me because of this from the beginning, weren't you? You were with me because I was rich and healthy. Now that I'm disabled, the most important thing." Slap. A loud slap interrupted Ming's words. Ming's head was buzzing. It was as if a swarm of flies were flying around his ears. Xiao Ziqing's eyes widened and she shouted, "You be *tch. How dare you hit my son?" As she said that, she flew forward. Ming laughed coldly. "Are you angry because your secret has been exposed? Lily, aren't you very tolerant? Now you're..." Slap. Another vicious slap landed on Ming's face. Neither side of his face was spared. Ming's head was dizzy, and his body swayed. Lily didn't expect Ming to be so fragile. The wounds on both sides of Ming's cheeks, which were wrapped in gauze, quickly oozed blood. Looking at his wobbly body, Lily subconsciously wanted to go forward and hold him. But she was pushed away harshly. Lily was caught off guard and stumbled. Xiao Ziqing's anxious voice could be heard. She cried out to Ming, "Son." Ming's head buzzed, and he barely managed to steady himself. Xiao Ziqing supported him. His surroundings were murky, and he felt a little dizzy. His heart ached as if it was being sliced into pieces. In the darkness, Ming could clearly feel the tears seeping from the corner of his eyes. He laughed coldly and said with some sadness, "Do you see that? I can't even avoid a woman's slap now. Do you fancy a man like that? How dare you say it's not for the money? Lily, you are so hypocritical." Lily's heart had originally felt sorry for him, but now it was all gone. This man, this kind of man. She must be blind to have fallen in love with this kind of man. She should have seen through it a long time ago. Was the lesson in the nightclub and the hospital not deep enough? Chapter 1169. It couldn't be changed. No matter what she did, no matter how much effort she put in, or how infatuated she was, Ming seemed to believe that she had ulterior motives. It had happened once, twice, and this was already the third time. Ming, I must have been *king blind." Lily didn't cry. Her eyes were filled with determination and desolation. She looked at the pitiful man in front of her and laughed coldly. "Remember what you said today, Ming. From now on, I won't come looking for you again. You'd better not come begging me. Otherwise, I'll despise you just like you despised me today. You'd better not give me that chance." With that, Lily turned around and quickly walked down the stairs. Faced with Huijin's meaningful gaze, Lily's heart ached. She quickly walked to the sofa, picked up her handbag and ran out the door. Once she was out the door, Lily's mood was surprisingly calm. There were no waves of emotions that she had imagined, no overflowing sorrow that she had imagined. Instead, there was an indescribable calmness. She couldn't even shed a tear. Lily stood at the door, waiting for the old lady to come out. She didn't know what the old lady was doing inside. After a few minutes, she came out. When she saw that Lily was waiting for her, the old lady went up to her and said, "Child, you're a good child." When Lily heard that, She tried her best to smile at old Mrs. Shun, but her muscles were tense. She couldn't force out a smile at all. Old Mrs. Shun looked at you, Lily, and reached out to gently push her hair back. If you can't bring yourself to smile, then don't. Let's go back. Okay. Lily lowered her gaze and led the old lady out to hail a taxi. At that moment, a taxi stopped. It had been busy, but now it was empty. Lily and the old lady waited for the person in the taxi to get out. Unexpectedly, they saw a familiar face. When Fenglin was a little surprised to see Lily there. Lily greeted, Uncle One. When Fenglin nodded his head and smiled, 2 deep dimples appeared on both sides of his cheeks. He looked very kind and benevolent. He looked at Lily and was about to speak when his gaze inadvertently landed on the old lady beside Lily. He froze. When old Mrs. Shun saw Wen Fenglin, she paused for a moment as well. Her murky eyes shone with a sharp light as she asked, It's you? You know each other? Lily was surprised. She looked at the old lady, and then at Wen Fenglin. Why does it feel like the relationship between them isn't very good? When Wen Fenglin saw old Mrs. Shun, the smile on his face disappeared. He asked, When did you come to Kingstown? As for the imperial capital, old Mrs. Shun looked at Wen Fenglin. Her face darkened and she laughed mirthlessly. What? Are you going to pick me up after I ask? Or are you going to treat me to a meal? You haven't eaten? Wen Fenglin asked with surprise. Why don't we? Forget it. Old Mrs. Shun looked at him and laughed mirthlessly. If you treat me to a meal, I'm afraid my lifespan will be shortened. With that, she pulled Lily to open the door of the taxi and said, Lily, let's go. Before Lily had time to digest the relationship between them, old Mrs. Shun had already pulled her into the car. Lily turned her head and smiled at Wen Fenglin. She looked apologetic. The old lady got the driver to drive off. Wen Fenglin watched as the taxi drove away. His eyes were cold and desolate. Chapter 1170. The taxi quickly disappeared. Wen Fenglin turned and walked back to the O residence. He pressed the doorbell, but it took a long time for the person inside to open the door. The person who opened the door was Xiao Ziqing. Her eyes were red, and she looked very sad. When she saw Wen Fenglin, she started yelling. You said that Lily was a good child. Do you know what that woman did? She hit my son. She made my son's face bleed. You and Oldo must be blind. This kind of woman sob. He couldn't continue and said, We must hurry and persuade Xiao to go to the hospital. He lost so much blood. I hope he doesn't get sick from the beating. She quickly led Wen Fenglin up to the 2nd floor. When they got there, they realized that the door was locked from the inside. Xiao Ziqing knocked on the door, but there was no response. Inside, Oming was lying on the bed. Huijin was looking at him from the side. His gaze was deep. His eyes were the same as Oming's, and they carried a penetrating sharpness. He looked at his son on the bed and said meaningfully, You've grown up. There are many things that parents shouldn't interfere with, but what you did today was too much. You were the one who provoked her, and now you're the one who insulted her. Why did you do that? Oming didn't open his eyes when he heard that. In a muffled voice he said, You don't like her, do you? Now that I've broken up with her, shouldn't you be happy? That's the only reason. I thought you said that to chase her away, because you didn't want to hold up this child's future. When Huijin said that, he kept his eyes on Oming. Indeed, when he saw Oming's desolate expression, he knew he was right. The child's temperament was like his. Huijin had probably thought it through. However, even if it was him, it was impossible for him to say such hurtful words. Just as Lily had said, it would be difficult to salvage the situation in the future. This child really didn't leave any way out for himself. You'll regret it, Huijin said bluntly. When Oming heard that, the regret in his heart had already swept over the sky and the earth. Yes, he would regret it. Oming was already very, very regretful. But could he regret it? Was there any room for regret now? Lily was still young, only 25 years old. Such a good girl shouldn't spend the rest of her life on a cripple. Even Oming himself couldn't see a future for him. He couldn't afford to gamble. His head was getting dizzier and dizzier. He felt as if his head was being crushed by something, and his cheeks were hot. But Oming didn't dare say it out loud. If he complained that he wasn't feeling well, Xiao Ziqing wouldn't let Yu Lili off. But now Oming couldn't help it. His head hurt, and gradually, everything around him seemed to be getting further and further away. Yu Lili took old Mrs. Shen out for dinner. When they returned to the hotel, they saw Shen Julia sitting on the sofa eating beef noodles, with a resentful look on his face. When he saw them coming up, he glared at Yu Lili, and then continued to eat. He said with jealousy and hatred, "You two went out to play without me. You are so mean." Chapter 1171. When Shen Julia heard that, he turned his head away with his bowl of beef noodles in his hands. After Yu Lili sat in the hotel for a while, Shen Julia suggested taking old Mrs. Shen to the nearby park and plaza that were very Kingstown style. As the host, Yu Lili naturally introduced them to a lot of local customs and stories. After walking around, it was not until 2 in the afternoon that everyone felt hungry. After finding a place to eat, they played for the rest of the afternoon. It was not until dark that they returned to the hotel to rest. After dinner, Yu Lili said she had to work, and went home after saying goodbye to old Mrs. Shen. Yu Lili took out the key and opened the door. When she entered and saw the familiar furnishings, her originally tense mood suddenly relaxed. Home. Finally home. Although there was no so-called family or relatives in this home, it was the only place in the world where she could find a sense of security. It was good to be back. Yu Lili found herself a set of pajamas, and then went into the bathroom. When the hot water sprinkled down from the top of her head, Yu Lili's body relaxed even more. After taking a shower and washing her clothes, Yu Lili applied a facial mask that she was usually reluctant to use. After sticking it on her face, she turned on the digital screen and held a pen to find a way to draw. As she drew, half an hour passed without her knowing it. It was not until the phone alarm rang that Yu Lili suddenly woke up. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening. It was time to sleep. Yu Lili washed off the mask, then turned off the digital screen, and lay on the bed. However, she was not sleepy at all. For the whole day, she felt as if something was hanging in her heart. It was like there was a dry fountain in the middle of an empty square. However, all of a sudden, the water at the bottom of the dried-up fountain suddenly gushed out continuously. Late at night, it was as cold as water. The loneliness buried in the deepest part of the human heart was always the easiest to quietly overflow in the middle of the night, when one was alone and silently penetrate into every cell of one's body. Meticulous turbulence was pervasive. Sorrow seeped into the heart and grew clusters of flowers, brightly facing all life. But in fact, no one could know that, in fact, watering this brilliance was actually fragile loneliness. One day, this loneliness would no longer be able to support this brilliance, and it would slowly rot from its roots. Then it would fall inch by inch, and it would no longer be the same as before. "If you don't want me, I'll kill you and then kill myself." Tears fell silently from the corner of her eyes. Yu Lili looked at the ceiling with a calm heart. However, there was an inexplicable sourness and pain. It was just a joke. How could she bear to kill him? There was no way she could do it. It was as if there was a blunt awl hammering deep into his heart, causing him a dull pain. Yu Lili turned over and covered her face with the quilt. The hot and humid feeling quickly covered her face. Breathing became more and more difficult, and Yu Lili was unwilling to raise her head. Her throat became more and more stuffy, and the hot and humid feeling stuck to her face and the quilt. In the end, he couldn't help but raise his head abruptly. Fresh air entered his nose, and the cool air made him feel refreshed. Yu Lili was breathing heavily. She didn't know if it was because of suffocation or something else, but her vision was blurred. He couldn't see anything. Chapter 1172. It was quiet all around. Only the sound of the heartbeat machine could be heard. After some time, there was a commotion all around. Oming frowned. The white light from his glasses stung his eyes. If he doesn't get better, it's hard to say when he will get better. But this situation is not uncommon. He may get better in a few days, or he may not get better for the rest of his life. You family members have to do a good job of counseling the patient. Oming couldn't hear what was said after that. He fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up again, it was still dark. Beep, beep, beep. The heartbeat on the electronic electrocardiogram was steady and rhythmic. Oming's heart suddenly jumped. The electrocardiogram fluctuated, but it quickly returned to normal. Lily was awakened by the doorbell. Lily had no idea when she had fallen asleep the night before. Her phone hadn't been charged the night before. When she went to get it, it was turned off. When she opened the door, it was old Mrs. Shun and Shunjilia. Lily had expected it, so she let them in before going to freshen up. The moment she entered, she realized that her eyes were swollen like 2 walnuts. Those eyes. I can't even look at them. She quickly applied them. She didn't know if it was a psychological effect, or if she really felt better. She looked left and right and walked out. Shunjilia and old Mrs. Shun acted as if they hadn't seen her. When they saw her, they suggested, "Lily, there are still a few more days before you start work, right? Do you want to go out with Grandma?" Go out with old Mrs. Shen? Lily didn't think it was appropriate, but when she saw the old lady's expectant gaze, she asked, "Where? How about Fujian? I heard that there are a lot of interesting places in Fujian. Moreover, there are many beautiful women there. Let's ask the youngest to drive us there. Anyway, Kingstown is not far from there. We can chat while taking the car there. We can also find a place with beautiful scenery to have a picnic. What do you think?" Old Mrs. Shun's eyes were filled with anticipation. I checked. It's only a few hours from Kingstown to Xiamen, and the scenery along the way is great. Lily looked at her expectant eyes and shook her head. Forget it, Grandma. You should go with Shunjilia. I haven't been in a good mood recently. I'm not in the mood to go out. Old Mrs. Shun refused to give up and said, Lily, it's precisely because you're in a bad mood that you want to go out and find a way to relax your soul. Isn't that right? Yes. Shunjilia immediately responded with a serious look on his face. Let's go together. It's rare for Grandma to come out. No matter how I asked her to come out in the past, she was always at home and didn't even bother to move. This is also the first time for me to come out with Grandma. Let's go. Shunjilia's gaze was sincere, and his eyes were bright and full of expression. It was as if he could see right into her heart. She shook her head and said, No, Shunjilia, you can go with Grandma. I went to Paris some time ago. I was too busy having fun and didn't have time to finish the draft. Now I have to finish the draft. You can go by yourselves. Shunjilia nodded and said, No thanks. After that, no matter how much old Mrs. Shun and Shunjilia tried to persuade her, Lily refused to budge. She was indeed in a very bad mood. Lily had never imagined that in the short span of 2 days, her life would change so drastically. Chapter 1173. After treating old Mrs. Shun and Shunjilia to dinner, Lily found an excuse to return home. What she didn't expect was that just as she walked to the entrance of the community, she saw a familiar figure appear at the entrance of the community. When Fenglin stepped out of the taxi, in his hand was a simple handbag. In the palm of his hand was a cell phone. It looked like he was calling someone. When Lily saw Fenglin, she was shocked. What is this person doing here? Is he looking for someone? Does he know someone who lives nearby? Or does he live in this neighborhood? Just as Lily was wondering about this, the cell phone in her pocket began to vibrate. She took a look and saw that the name on the screen was Uncle One. Lily answered the call and placed it to her ear. Uncle One. Lass, where are you? When Fenglin asked. Lily took 2 steps forward to the entrance of the neighborhood and replied, I'm here. When Fenglin heard Lily's voice, he turned his head and looked over. When he saw Lily on the phone, he chuckled. 2 dimples appeared on his cheeks, making him look exceptionally good-looking. Lily hung up the phone at the same time. She looked at Fenglin with some doubt and apprehension in her heart. Fenglin and Qiao Ziqing are good friends. Is he helping Qiao Ziqing to cause trouble for me? As if he could sense Lily's uneasiness, the smile on Fenglin's face widened. Beneath his black-rimmed glasses, his small eyes narrowed as he asked, Is there a place nearby for us to sit? He had asked to sit nearby, not at Lily's house. The subtle details made Lily's heart relax a little. She nodded her head and replied, Yes. She brought Fenglin to a nearby cafe. Because of the Spring Festival, it was usually a busy time. But there weren't that many people there. Lily chose a quiet corner. They each ordered a drink and sat facing each other. Lily waited for him to speak first. When Fenglin looked at Lily and said, "I heard that you beat up Ming yesterday. You were pretty vicious. He was knocked unconscious." Lily was stunned. She looked at Wen Fenglin and tried to find a hint of a joke on his face. But he didn't. It can't be. Ming is unconscious. Lily's heart was beating wildly. Wen Fenglin nodded his head and replied, "Ming's mother is very upset. I think it's best that you go visit Ming. He's not in a good state right now. If you can stay by his side, his condition should improve." After all, to Ming, Lily's status was very, very special. Just like how he was like Sienna in the past. When Fenglin believed that their relationship was deeper than his and Sienna's, Lily's hands were under the table, and her palms were tightly twisted together. At this moment, it was as if a raging fire had been set ablaze in her heart, causing all the determination in her heart to vanish in an instant. "Shall we go and see him?" He didn't seem to be in a good state. Uncle Wen's words could be trusted. Lily almost swayed. But then she remembered what Ming had said to her yesterday. Chapter 1174. Is his condition that bad? The words from the day before were still ringing in her head. Her mind was a mess. She was caught in a dilemma. Ming's condition isn't good. Is he still unconscious? Judging from Uncle Wen's expression, he doesn't seem to be anxious or nervous. That can't be true, can it? When Fenglin looked at her intently and nodded his head. Not very well. He's been unconscious since yesterday. The doctor said that once he wakes up, the condition of his eyes might worsen. In other words, it was very likely that Ming would never see again. Lily suddenly felt a warm current rush through her. She couldn't stop the tears from welling up in her eyes. When she felt Wen Fenglin's meaningful gaze, Lily felt like he was a prison warden judging a prisoner. Looking at her with such a gaze made her feel very uncomfortable. Lily thought about it and smiled. In a low voice she said, "Uncle Wen, Ming is blessed by heaven. He'll definitely recover." "I hope so. I also hope that he will recover soon. After all, Ming calls me uncle. Given his current condition, I'm worried for him." When Fenglin looked at Lily and continued, "The reason why I came to look for you is that I hope that Ming will regain consciousness sooner. To be honest, Ming's mother didn't allow me to look for you. She feels that you're the one who caused her son to become like this. The 2 slaps you gave him yesterday only worsened his injuries." Without a doubt, Xiao Ziqing must hate Lily very much. Lily knew that very well. She smiled and said, "Uncle Wen, you weren't around yesterday. You might not have understood what he said to me yesterday. I'll remember what Ming said yesterday. If anything happens to Ming in the future, I hope that you won't tell me. It's none of my business." Furthermore, she was afraid that after hearing about Ming's condition, her heart would soften, and she wouldn't be able to control herself. "You won't be able to let it go." Wen Fenglin's words hit the nail on the head. He looked at Lily with a smile on his face. "This child of yours is very similar to someone I used to know. Is that why he's treating me so well?" Lily seemed to understand something, but she didn't say a word. The drink that she had ordered was served. Lily didn't touch it. She looked at Wen Fenglin and stood up. "Uncle Wen, thank you for coming to tell me today, but I won't be going. I have something to do. I'll head back first." As he spoke, he was already walking out of his seat. His heart felt like it was being clenched tightly. Wen Fenglin looked at Lily in astonishment. Before coming, Wen Fenglin had thought of countless possibilities, but he hadn't expected Lily to reject him outright. Lily's attitude was beyond Wen Fenglin's expectations. What Wen Fenglin hadn't expected was that Lily's actions would earn him a sense of admiration. When he realized this, Wen Fenglin laughed bitterly to himself. Wen said. Wen. Little boy, it's not that I don't want to help you. It's just that you've crossed the line. Wen Fenglin muttered to himself. One of. You. Chapter 1175. Lily was a little embarrassed. She cleared her throat and said, "I haven't finished drawing yet. It's almost time for the update." If I don't rush the draft, I'm afraid the readers will scold me. You draw as well. When Fenglin was a little surprised. This was the first time he had heard of Yu Lily's occupation. Yu Lily was even more embarrassed. She cleared her throat and tried to act natural, but she couldn't stop her face from heating up. She nodded her head and said, "The nature of my drawing is different from yours. I serialize my comics online." Impressive. When Fenglin's eyes lit up. "Can I take a look at your comics?" Yu Lily was even more embarrassed. "I draw shoujo comics. I can't show them to you." "That's all right. Comics are also a form of art. They have a story and are readable. They're much better than antiques like us," when Fenglin said with a smile. He immediately changed the topic. "It's fine if you really can't do it. I'm just a little curious." Oops, Yu Lily had a good impression of when Fenglin. Since the elders had already spoken so clearly, it wouldn't be right for her to turn them down again. She thought about it and took out her phone. She opened the Eurasian Comics app and found her work. She opened it and said, "This is what I drew." When Fenglin took it from her and flipped through it a few times, Yu Lily couldn't see when Fenglin's expression. She stood there awkwardly. This was the first time someone she knew had asked her about her work. It was also the first time someone she knew was looking at her comics. Yu Lily had a strange feeling about it. Yu Lily's hair stood on end. She asked, "Isn't it a little childish?" "No, it's very well drawn." When Fenglin looked at the drawing style, "It's different from the comics I've seen in the past. Yours is more realistic. Why does this male lead look so familiar?" The male lead in the drawing was wearing a burgundy suit. His short black hair was the most popular hairstyle of the day. The male lead on the screen was holding a champagne glass. He was squinting his eyes and looking ahead. His features were well defined, and he looked very handsome. However, compared to other comics, Yu Lily's drawing was more realistic. The character in the painting was based on Oming, so of course he looked familiar. Yu Lily laughed dryly. Just as she was about to say something, she realized that when Fenglin had flipped to the page and looked at the title, "Love Transaction," the main storyline of the comic was based on Yu Lily's own life. When the title was read, Yu Lily's heart skipped a beat. She quickly snatched her phone back. When she met Fenglin's gaze, she felt a little uneasy. When Fenglin merely smiled and replied, "I've seen this comic before. It's ranked at the top of the national comic rankings. It's very popular. Someone introduced this comic to me in the hopes that I would give it a chance to promote it. I haven't had the time to check it out." "I didn't expect the artist to be you." Yu Lily was stunned. She was secretly shocked by Fenglin's words. So the Eurasian comic had actually gotten Fenglin to recommend it? Fenglin's reputation in the country was not to be underestimated. If Fenglin was the one to promote her, the effect would be. Chapter 1176. Cross-border publicity was bound to have an unimaginable effect on comics. But for the artist himself, there was no benefit. Moreover, such a thing was also a thankless task for the Eurasian comics. The only people who would benefit from it would be the comics and the artist. The more Yu Lily thought about it, the more she realized something. It was Oming. Eurasian Comics was his company. He must have known about her work and her career. Oming must have gotten his men to help her with the publicity. That way, once Yu Lily's reputation was established, her future would be smooth sailing. But something like this had happened to Oming. Wait a minute. If Oming was willing to do that for me, then he must be serious about me, right? Yu Lily didn't believe that it was simply because I was his girlfriend or a mistress. If he was sincere, then why did he say those things the day before? It wasn't just the day before. It was the last time, and the time before that. Yu Lily felt that she didn't understand him. In other words, she had never understood this man before. This man's mood swings were unpredictable. All along, he had been overbearing and arrogant. He never explained what he was thinking, and no one could understand him. "Uncle One, when did I get you to do the publicity for me?" "Probably last month. I was in Fujian at the time, and the people from Eurasian Comics came to talk to me." Yu Lily nodded her head. The fire that had been burning in her heart slowly died down. Times had changed. The Oming now was no longer the Oming of last month. Yu Lily smiled at Wen Fenglin and nodded her head. I see. Uncle Wen, please sit here for a while. I'll go up to rush the draft. A serialized drawing can't be delayed for too long. Otherwise, it'll lose popularity. All right. Go ahead. When Fenglin nodded his head, Yu Lily turned around and left. When Yu Lily got home, she held the stylus for a long time. Her mind was a mess. Sometimes it was Wen Fenglin's words, and sometimes it was old Mrs. Shun's. Sometimes it was Oming's and Xiao Ziqing's voices. Frustration. Oming isn't in a good state. Not in a good state. How bad is that? The people from Eurasian Comics came to me to talk to me. It was hard to estimate the amount of funds and costs required to hire such an artist for publicity. Such a man who treated her like this. Yu Lily's hand holding the pen slightly shrank, and she imagined Oming's current posture. What did he look like now? Suddenly his cell phone rang. The sudden tremor made Yu Lily's heart skip a beat. The stylus fell to the ground with a clatter. The caller ID showed, Old Madam Shun. After Yu Lily calmed down a little, she answered the phone. Old Mrs. Shun was just bored, so she called to nag. Yu Lily chatted with her for a while before hanging up. However, after hanging up the phone, the desire to see Oming in her heart became even stronger. She wanted to see him, She wanted to see him. Endless breakups, endless love. Chapter 1177. Coincidentally, when Fenglin had a few documents and other matters to attend to, he sat in the shop for a while. When he was done, he stood up to leave. As soon as he stepped out of the shop, he saw Yu Lily standing at the entrance of the estate, waiting for a taxi. A taxi was coming her way. Yu Lily quickly stopped it and got in. When Fenglin looked at her and knew where she was going, watching the taxi from afar, When Fenglin couldn't help but laugh. What a hypocrite. She was just like her. When Fenglin's eyes darkened as he thought of the woman in his memories. By the time Yu Lily reached the hospital in a taxi, it was already half an hour later. On the 5th day of the Lunar New Year, there were fewer people at the hospital than usual. Oming was considered half a public figure. If she asked directly, the receptionist wouldn't tell her where Oming was. Yu Lily went in and walked to the VIP ward area with ease. The O family had a habit, nostalgia. They would probably still be staying in room V8. As Yu Lily walked in that direction, she decided to take a gamble. She didn't expect to see Oming's ward when she got closer. However, as soon as he got closer, he heard voices coming from inside. That woman is so evil. Not only did she hurt you like this, she even hit you yesterday. Xiao Ziqing's voice was sobbing. She sounded sad and full of hatred. Xiao Ziqing had never had a good impression of Yu Lily, especially after Yu Lily had hit her son the day before. Xiao Ziqing felt that the woman was despicable. She has ulterior motives and deserves to be punished. When Yu Lily heard Xiao Ziqing's voice from outside, she stopped in her tracks and stood at the door. Oming didn't say a word. Xiao Ziqing continued, I don't care if what you said yesterday was true or false. Since you broke up with her, it's best if you don't contact her again. I've already listened to you and blacklisted her number on your phone. I've also deleted the speed dial. From now on, just pretend that this woman never appeared. I've already listened to you. Did Oming ask Xiao Ziqing to do that? It turned out that Oming was not only like this in front of her, but also in front of his mother. A blind person who couldn't see anything let others put her number into the blacklist. In that case, she would never be able to contact him again. It was impossible for a blind person to pull her number out of the blacklist. As for the others, it was even more impossible for them to help him pull it out. Yu Lily stood at the door and felt like a fool. Yu Lily's heart ached, and her original idea of going in disappeared. She didn't want to go in anymore. However, at the same time as she turned around, a low voice came from inside. It was muffled, but it seemed to reach into her heart. Yes, it was Oming. Yu Lily's heart was like a wisp of dry straw floating on a charcoal fire. When it came into contact with the fire, it instantly burned into ashes and scattered. It seemed that Xiao Ziqing really hated him. Since ancient times, it was impossible to be loyal and filial at the same time. Chapter 1178. At that moment, she felt like a drowning dog. She couldn't describe how miserable she was. She wasn't in front of them, but the feeling was as strong as ever. She walked away faster and faster. She lowered her head and didn't even dare to look back. She walked away quickly. In the ward, Xiao Ziqing was surprised by Ming's answer. She asked, "Really? You promise me?" Ming's eyes were empty, and he looked ahead without any focus. At first glance, they looked like the eyes of those imitation dolls. "You're my mother. I'll do whatever you say. Anyway, I don't have the slightest choice in front of you, do I?" Ming stared blankly ahead, and a bitter smile hung on his lips. He looked a little helpless, but at the same time, everyone could clearly feel that he was sad. Xiao Ziqing was taken aback when she heard this. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. After a moment of silence, Xiao Ziqing asked, "Are you still blaming me? You are my mother. I dare not blame you," Ming said. However, when these words were heard by others, it was even more chilling. Xiao Ziqing's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Ming and said earnestly, "Mom is doing this for your own good. What's so good about that woman? Why do you insist on having her? Do you want her to kill you before you can give up? You are my son. I will never harm you." Yes, it was all for his own good. She was his mother. How could she deliberately harm him? But it was this kind of love and kindness that made his head hurt. They were all doing this for his own good. Why should he not listen? They were all doing this for his own good. So his own choice would also be completely taken away, not even leaving a single shred of it. Everything was for the sake of that honorable banner. It was for his own good. The bitter smile on Ming's face widened, and he said, "I know. Anyway, I'm blind now, and I don't want to hold her back. It's good to let her go. If we break up, she can find someone better. There is more than one man in the world. But in this world, there was only one you, Lily." Ming lay down, pulled up the quilt, and lay on his side. When Xiao Ziqing heard this, she felt that Ming was even more stubborn. Looking at Ming lying on the bed, she was so angry that she stomped her feet. At the same time, she was so distressed that she didn't know what to say. Looking at her son for a long time, Xiao Ziqing actually didn't know whether what she was doing was right or wrong. Xiao Ziqing stood in place for a long time before she finally gritted her teeth and said, "One day, you'll understand my good intentions. You're not the only man in this world, but you're my only son. I can't let her kill you." This woman was not a kind person. She had evil intentions. After Xiao Ziqing finished speaking, she was even more certain of her thoughts. She stomped her feet, turned around, and left. Ming listened as the footsteps faded away and opened his eyes. In front of him, it was as if Lily, dressed in red and smiling like a flower, appeared. Today was the 5th day of the Lunar New Year. 25 years ago today, Kingstown welcomed its rare winter. 25 years ago, it was snowing in Kingstown, a rare occurrence in 100 years. The kind director of the orphanage saved a newborn baby girl and named her Lily. Chapter 1179. Lily walked like a zombie. When she took a taxi home, she was called out by the taxi driver. She paid the fare and went upstairs. When she got out of the elevator, she started to look for the key. She had only been away for a day, but she was very attached to this place. It was just a shared house, but it was the only place in the world that she could call home. She entered the password and took out the key to open the door. It was dark inside. Lily followed her memory and touched the switch. When she was about to open it, there was a sudden movement inside. The sound of high heels came from inside, and Lily's heart was alarmed, but at the same time, full of surprise, and a familiar voice suddenly shouted, "Surprise!" A few familiar voices mixed together, sounding very excited. Among them, the most excited voice was undoubtedly old Mrs. Shun. The chandelier in the living room was turned on, and there were many balloons in the living room. Everyone was wearing a hat on their head. It looked very lovely and festive. Old Mrs. Shun walked toward Lily with a heart-shaped balloon in her hands and shouted, "Lily, why are you back so soon? We are not fully prepared." Lily was stunned when she saw the scene. In front of her, not only was old Mrs. Shun, but also Shunjilia, Yi Chanqian, Yi Yuyu, and a few colleagues who were good friends with her in the company. They were all here. Don't you go to work on the 8th day of the new year? Today is only the 5th. Yu Lily's first reaction was to blurt out, Yi Qianqian, and a few colleagues came forward and helped her to sit on the sofa. Yi Qianqian said, yes, but I came back early. Today is your birthday. We discussed it a long time ago to give you a surprise. How is it? Are you surprised by your sister's surprise? Yu Lily looked at them in a daze. Everything around her, including the big cake box on the coffee table, and the colleagues and friends around her, all looked very happy. His originally ice-cold heart felt as if it had been injected with a warm current in an instant. Yu Lily looked at Yi Qianqian's big smile in front of her, and tears welled up in her eyes. Very quickly, she held back the tears and smiled at them with a big smile. Didn't I waste your vacation? I won't compensate you for your losses. Yi Qianqian took out a hat and put it on her head. She glared at her and said, if you don't compensate me, I'm still hoping that you'll take us on a vacation. You want to travel? Yeah, I heard all about it. Did you really break up with Oming? Yi Qianqian leaned over and whispered. Yu Lily was stunned when she heard that. When Yi Qianqian saw the expression on Yu Lily's face, she knew she was right. Before Yu Lily could react, she immediately said, well done. You shouldn't miss something like that. Look at Shen Jilia. He's handsome, rich, and a psychiatrist. His mental fortitude is impeccable. Why would he give up a field of flowers for a pile of cow dung? Yu Lily's eyes widened. Yi Qianqian's metaphor was not polite at all. Yu Lily's lips twitched. This was the first time she had heard someone compare Oming to cow dung. Chapter 1180. In front of her, Shen Jilia's bright smile appeared and waved at Yu Lily. Yu Lily glanced at him and was speechless. She turned back and said, don't pick the wildflowers on the side of the road. Yi Qianqian burst out laughing, and Shen Jilia's face fell. He said with some resentment, how did I become a wildflower? I'm better than many people. That's right. You're much better than your previous ex-boyfriend. Yi Qianqian snorted, thinking of the last time she was drunk and lying in the living room all night. She wanted to slap that man. What kind of man is he? He doesn't care about women at all. Doesn't he know how to cherish women? Doesn't he know how to help women back to their rooms? It wasn't easy for her to lie on the cold floor all night. Although the other two colleagues didn't know what kind of person Oming was, Shen Jilia was indeed very good. Hearing Yi Qianqian's words, they immediately seconded. That's right, Lily. Shen is a good person. He is handsome and has good qualifications. What do you want? What does your ex-boyfriend look like? Do you have a picture? His qualifications are definitely not as good as Shen's, right? Shen Jilia was from the capital. If Yu Lily married Shen Jilia, she would definitely become a resident of the capital. Such a thing would start to change fundamentally. If such a good thing happened to them, they would definitely agree without hesitation. Maybe they would force themselves on her. And then the rice would be cooked. Then, wouldn't it be natural for them to marry him and become a resident of the capital? Although the local residents of Kingstown were also very good, they were still inferior to those in the capital. Yu Lily knew what they were thinking, so she decided to ignore them. Shen Jilia quickly said, since Lily is back, let's do it this way. There's no need to prepare anything else. Just sit down. That manner, that posture, impressively was like that of a male master. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but look at Shen Jilia, and secretly gave him a thumbs up. Good guy, he's so thick-skinned. I like it. Shen Jilia pretended not to see Yi Qianqian's eyes, and asked the other two colleagues to sit down. Then he opened the cake box. The cake was huge, huge, huge. Old Mrs. Shen's eyes lit up as she looked at the huge cake. When Yu Lily saw the cake, she was even more stunned. It was a strawberry cake. The whole cake was densely covered with strawberries. Apart from the strawberries, there were also chocolate decorations. It looked very fragrant, very delicious. Shen Jilia began to insert and light the candles. There were exactly 25 of them. It seemed that, every year on her birthday, the people around her would change. But none of those years had given her such a warm and pleasant surprise. Even Oming hadn't given her such a feeling. After Shen Jilia lit the candles, everyone urged Yu Lily to make a wish. Yu Lily chuckled, closed her eyes, put her palms together and said, I hope so many people will celebrate my birthday with me every year. Old Mrs. Shun's heart ached when she heard that, and so did Yi Qianqian. However, she immediately put on a straight face and said, It won't come true if you say it out loud. Say it again in your heart. Say it differently. Hearing that, Yu Lily's eyes curved. Chapter 1181. After blowing out the candles, Yu Lily picked up a plastic knife and started cutting the cake. The cake was too big and thick, and Yu Lily's hands weren't strong enough. She only messed up the cake after a long time. Shenjilia couldn't stand it anymore. He went behind Yu Lily and reached out to hold her hand. Yu Lily was so focused on the cake in front of her that she didn't expect Shenjilia to suddenly make such a move. She could clearly feel the warmth of the man behind her. Shenjilia's warm breath was beside her ear. His actions were ambiguous. Everyone stared at him. The other two female colleagues wanted to make a fuss, but when they saw Shenjilia's calm expression, they thought they were overthinking it. However, Yu Lily, who was the person in question, was obviously shocked and stunned. Before she could turn her head, she felt Shenjilia's hand tighten slightly. He held her hand and cut it off. After cutting the cake, Shenjilia immediately let go of her hand. Happy birthday! Yi Qianqian took the lead and shouted. Seeing Yu Lily's slightly shocked expression, everyone tacitly didn't mention it. Yu Lily looked back at Shenjilia and found that he wasn't looking at her. Instead, he took out the disposable plate of the cake and divided it up. Seeing that, Yu Lily lowered her head to cut the cake. When she was halfway through, Shenjilia came forward and snatched the knife away. He said, You're so slow. Let me do it. This scene was witnessed by all the women. When old Mrs. Shen saw it, she had a new understanding of her grandson's tricks and tricks. She secretly gave Shenjilia a look of approval. Then, she turned her head and continued to play dumb. After everyone finished eating the cake, their stomachs were almost full. Their original plan to go out for supper had to be cancelled. Yi Qianqian took out a deck of cards from somewhere, and the four of them played together. Old Mrs. Shen was getting on in years, and she woke up early in the morning. After eating the cake, she felt a little tired. She watched a group of young people play on the sofa and fell asleep before she knew it. Old Mrs. Shen sat behind Shenjilia, and Yu Lily sat across from them. Seeing the old lady like that, Yu Lily asked Shenjilia to take the old lady back first. However, the old lady wouldn't wake up no matter how hard she tried. Yu Lily had no choice but to let Shenjilia carry the old lady to sleep in her room. After the few of them finished playing cards, they went their separate ways to chat. At the end of the conversation, everyone was thinking about how they should spend the next 2 days of vacation. There was no conclusion to the discussion. The two colleagues felt bored, so they left first. Not long after the two colleagues left, Shenjilia suddenly looked up and said, Why don't we go on a trip? Hearing this, Yi Qianqian suddenly became excited. She looked at Shenjilia in front of her, and her eyes lit up. She asked, Where are we going for a vacation? Let's go to Fujian. I heard it's very beautiful there. Shenjilia's words were directed at Yi Qianqian, but his eyes were looking at Yu Lily. My grandmother also wants to go, but because you're not going, she doesn't want to go either. It's rare that grandmother is in the mood to travel. Why don't you come along? Although old Mrs. Shun was old, she was playful and even a little childish. Chapter 1182. Yu Lily had clearly rejected the idea that day, but Shenjilia had brought it up again. Yu Lily could tell that old Mrs. Shen really wanted to go. Most importantly, Yi Qianqian looked like she really wanted to go too. A vacation? It was good to relax. Yu Lily thought about it, and quickly nodded her head. Shenjilia smiled, and looked at Yu Lily with a burning gaze. He nodded his head and said, All right, let's go. That night, old Mrs. Shun and Yu Lily slept together, and Shenjilia returned to the hotel. The next morning, at 7 or 8 o'clock, Shenjilia rang the doorbell. What surprised Yi Qianqian and Yu Lily the most was that he had everything prepared. A car for the trip, snacks to eat, and a hotel reservation had been made. Yu Lily, Yi Qianqian, and old Mrs. Shen only had to pack a change of clothes before they set off. Kingstown wasn't far from Fujian, but it was a 3 to 4 hour drive. Along the way, they chatted and laughed, and time passed quickly. Very soon, the local scenery was revealed. The spring-like scenery was breathtakingly beautiful. When they reached the hotel, it was past 1 in the afternoon. After dinner, they went to the nearby scenic spots. What a great place! Eulili couldn't help but exclaim as she stood by the clear lake. At a glance, the mountains were foggy, and the sounds of birds chirping and wings flapping could be heard. The surface of the water was sparkling, and the sound of gurgling was endless. The air was fresh, and the sun shone down, making the place look like a fairyland. Beautiful. It's even more beautiful when the sun rises, old Mrs. Shun said with a smile as she stood behind Eulili. Eulili looked at the old lady, and the old lady looked back at her. That pair of slightly turbid old eyes looked very bright at this moment. Eulili saw her own reflection in the old lady's eyes. Old Mrs. Shun's eyes reddened, and she lamented, "It's not easy to be able to stand here with you. Did you know, Lily? You actually look like the daughter of a friend of mine." Eulili looked at old Mrs. Shun and waited for her to continue. Old Mrs. Shun changed the topic and didn't continue. Instead, she asked, "How did you meet Wenfenglin?" Eulili thought for a moment and carefully chose her words. Then, she told him everything in detail. In the end, she added, "Uncle Wen is a very good person. He treats me very well." Old Mrs. Shun had a look of understanding on her face as she said, "Wenfenglin is a good man, but I'm guessing that the reason he treats you so well is because he can tell that you resemble that old friend of his." "Sienna?" Eulili asked tentatively. "How did you know?" "I heard Uncle Wen and Oming's mother mention it." Chapter 1183. Old Mrs. Shun wanted to say something, but stopped herself. She shook her head and said, "It's such a pity for such a good girl. Her health has been poor since she was young. She has kidney problems and heart problems. It's impossible for her to marry, let alone be with a man." Eulili was an adult. She knew what old Mrs. Shun meant. She couldn't be with a man. If what old Mrs. Shun said was true, then given Wenfenglin's personality, he would never do anything with Sienna. If it weren't for that, I would have suspected that you were Sienna's daughter. Old Mrs. Shun smiled. Her eyes were filled with kindness. "Do I look like her?" Old Mrs. Shun shook her head and said, "You don't look alike, but your charm is similar." As she spoke, she walked to Eulili's side and said, "Especially this side of your face. You look very much like Sienna, except that Sienna is fairer than you. It's not your healthy skin tone, but the pale kind of white." Eulili could imagine what that must have been like. Old Mrs. Shun frowned as she looked Eulili up and down. She rubbed her chin and muttered, "From the side, you look a little alike. But upon closer inspection, you look healthier and more delicate than Sienna. You're more exquisite, and your features aren't alike either." There was an indescribable feeling that people couldn't help but pull her towards Sienna. It was a familiar feeling. They didn't look alike in any way, but the more they spent time together, the stronger the feeling became. Old Mrs. Shun gestured and shook her head. "Nope." Eulili was amused by the old lady's expression. Looking at old Mrs. Shun, the feeling of familiarity in her heart grew stronger. How nice it would be if she was really my grandmother. With that thought in mind, Eulili's expression softened a little. The afterglow of the setting sun shone from afar. The orange-red sunset reflected off the surface of the lake. The sunlight pierced through the clouds and bathed everyone's hair and body in an orange-red hue. It was beautiful and dazzling. Shinjilia stood not far behind and watched Eulili in the distance. His lips curled into a smile, and his gaze softened. Yi Qianqian squatted by the bridge and looked at Shinjilia's unwavering gaze. She pouted her lips, picked up a stone, and threw it into the lake. "Let's go somewhere else to play, Grandma." Eulili took old Mrs. Shun's hand. When she turned around, she met Shinjilia's gaze. But very quickly, Shinjilia's gaze shifted away. It was as if he had inadvertently turned his head to look at her without leaving a trace. Eulili didn't care. She took the old lady's hand and walked toward the exit. He didn't notice the strange look in Yi Qianqian's eyes behind him. After playing for a while, they ate something together and then returned to the hotel together. Yu Lily and Yi Qianqian were both girls, so they booked a room for themselves. Old Mrs. Han and Shen Jilia each had a room. Yu Lily asked Yi Qianqian to take a shower first. She sat on the bed with her phone in her hand and scrolled through Weibo. Just as he was laughing so hard while watching a short video, a phone call interrupted the video. An unknown number called, and the caller ID was the city she was currently in. Who could it be? Yu Lily's first thought was that it was a prank call. The phone rang a few times, but the caller didn't hang up. She picked it up. Hello. Chapter 1184. Police station. Boyfriend. My boyfriend is at the police station? What the hell? Where did my boyfriend come from? Why is he at the police station? Yu Lily was confused and asked, Mr. Policeman, are you mistaken? I don't have a boyfriend. You don't have a boyfriend, but this gentleman said he was your boyfriend and gave us your phone number for us to call. The policeman's voice was a little loud and not very friendly. Miss, no matter what you quarreled with, you shouldn't have left a blind man on the road. It's so dangerous. Fortunately, he knew to come to the police station for help. He doesn't have a guide cane or a guide dog. If he was hit by a car on the road, you'd be in deep trouble. A blind man? Oh Ming? Yu Lily couldn't believe it and asked, Mr. Policeman, what's the name of the man who claimed to be my boyfriend? I think his surname is O. The policeman's voice was obviously a little farther away. I'm talking to your girlfriend on the phone. What's your name? After a while, the man on the other side of the phone said, he said his name is O Ming. Yu Lily had guessed many times, and every guess was O Ming. But when she heard O Ming's name, Yu Lily was still shocked. O Ming? Is it really O Ming? Is it really O Ming? Yu Lily couldn't believe it and said, can you ask him to answer the phone? Just a moment. The man on the other side of the phone seemed to be communicating, but Yu Lily had already sat up. At that moment, her heart was still full of disbelief. Taking advantage of this gap, Yu Lily put the phone on speaker, and then went to Baidu to check the number. As soon as the number was dialed, it immediately showed the address of the local police station, as well as the phone number, the director, and the person in charge. Oh my God! It really is the police station. There was a rustling sound on the other side of the phone, and the policeman quickly came over and said, the gentleman refused to answer the phone. Miss, you please come over. It's so late. Do you have to make a quarrel between lovers so big? Yu Lily was speechless. A quarrel between lovers really didn't have to be so big. But now the point was that she and O Ming were no longer lovers. Not to mention that they weren't lovers, they weren't even friends. What right did she have to pick her up? Girlfriend? I'm sorry, I do know him, but I'm not his girlfriend. You should ask someone else to pick him up. Aya, it's already past 10 o'clock in the evening. The person in charge here is ready to get off work, because he has worked overtime for almost half an hour. He doesn't have any money with him now. I heard that in order to find you, he hasn't eaten for a whole day. He can't see and his hand is injured. He looks so pitiful. Yu Lily was silent for a moment, then said, Mr. Policeman, can you do me a favor and take him to a hotel to stay? I'll transfer the money to your account and let him eat and stay. This is a police station, not a shelter, nor an errand station. I'll send the address to your phone. You can come over now. As he spoke, he actually hung up the phone. Yu Lily felt a headache and sighed with her hand on her forehead. He had no choice but to put on his shoes and coat, then took a taxi to the police station. When she got out of the car, Yu Lily shivered in the cold wind. It was unexpectedly cold today. Chapter 1185. At that moment, O Ming was sitting in front of a table. He was wearing a thin jacket with silk pajamas underneath. His hand was in a cast and hung around his neck. He was also wearing thin silk pajama pants. The dark purple satin glowed faintly under the fluorescent light. He looked very noble, and one could tell at a glance that he was very expensive. However, he was only wearing a pair of ordinary cotton shoes. He looked a little down and out, a little ragged. What made her heart ache was O Ming's eyes. They were supposed to be bright and bright, but at that moment, they were empty and unfocused. They were like the eyes of a rag doll. Without a soul, they were gray and dark. Lily's footsteps slowed down as she walked inside. Seeing Ming like that made her heart ache. She was clearly in front of him, but he couldn't see her. But why is he here? Shouldn't he be in Kingstown at this time? And shouldn't he be in the hospital at this time? What is going on? There were policemen chatting inside. When they saw Lily come in, one of them immediately lit up and shouted, "Miss you, are you here to pick up Mr. O?" When he heard the policeman's words, Ming was obviously stunned. He turned his head in Lily's direction and faced her. When Lily heard the policeman's words, she smiled and said, "I am Lily. Please wait a moment." Ming faced the front of Lily and reached his hand out toward her. When Lily saw his hand, she stopped in her tracks. Lily felt a sudden pain in her heart when she saw him reaching out to her so naturally. Ming was expressionless. He didn't say a word, but he easily affected her emotions. This guy is so disgusting. Soon, Lily looked up and automatically ignored his hand. She pretended not to see it and looked at the policeman. When did he come? At 10 o'clock, I think. We saw him wandering on the road, so we brought him back, a policeman said. It's not that I want to criticize you young people, but how can you let a blind man wander around? Fortunately, nothing happened. If something happened, who could bear the responsibility? Yes, no one could bear the responsibility. However, such a responsibility should not be borne by her. Lily's gaze finally returned to Ming. She looked at his hand that was still extended toward her and asked, "How did you get here?" Ming didn't say anything. He reached out and grabbed Lily. Lily looked at him and took a step back easily. Then Ming jumped into the air. "Shouldn't you be hospitalized at this time? Did the doctor agree to discharge you?" Lily's tone was not very pleasant. She sounded very disgusted. Hearing Lily's tone, the surrounding police officers, who had thought that she would quickly take the man away, looked at each other. However, Ming still did not speak. His rosy lips were pursed into a thin line, and his eyes were empty as he looked ahead. Lily's tone became even worse. As if she had lost her temper, she roared, "Do your parents know that you came from Kingstown?" Still there was no answer. Ming was like a mute, refusing to say a word. Chapter 1186. He knew that she couldn't just sit back and do nothing. He knew that she couldn't just leave him be. He was the one who broke up with her first. He was the one who chased her away. He was also the one who was afraid that she would covet his family's money. How could he still come to her so naturally? He didn't even change his clothes. He didn't even bring anyone with him. Lily could even tell at a glance that the jacket he was wearing wasn't Ming's at all. He was wearing such a thin set of pajamas. And he was looking for someone? Didn't he feel embarrassed? Didn't he feel embarrassed by his behavior? Lily looked at him with hatred and gritted her teeth. "I'll call your mother and ask her to come pick you up." As she spoke, she picked up her phone and scrolled through her contact list. Who would have thought that Ming would suddenly stand up and accurately slap her cell phone away? The phone fell to the ground. Lily widened her eyes at the man in front of her. She was a little angry. "This is the police station. You're damaging my personal property." As she spoke, she picked up her phone and turned to look at the policeman. "Mr. Policeman, you've seen it for yourself. Please leave him here. I'll call his mother. I'll leave first." But Ming still didn't say a word. He walked forward and reached out with his uninjured hand to grab Lily's hand. Lily was quick to react and quickly dodged. Ming's hand missed and grabbed her down jacket. Just like that, he tugged hard and refused to let go. "Hey, are you crazy? Let go." Lily held the phone in one hand and tried to pull him away with the other. But Ming's strength was surprisingly strong. Lily couldn't move him at all. Lily's anger rose. At that moment, she felt that this man was shameless and unreasonable. She raised her phone and smashed it into his palm. "Let go! Let go! Let go!" Ming's hands, which were already stiff from the cold, immediately turned red after being beaten so many times. No matter how Lily hit him, Ming didn't make a sound. "Do you have any shame? How can a man entangle a woman like me? Let go!" Lily couldn't bear it anymore. She roared and hit him harder. Ming! Seeing this, the policeman, who thought it was just a couple quarreling, also felt that something was wrong. They couldn't care less about watching the fun, and hurried forward to pull them apart. They warned, "Miss, this is the police station. You can't beat disabled people." Disabled people. These 4 words were even more hurtful. As expected, Lily clearly saw Ming's movements pause. It was obvious that his expression changed slightly. Lily didn't feel happy at all. Instead, she was a little annoyed. She turned her head and glared at the policeman, shouting, "What disabled person? How does such a big man look like a disabled person? You just can't see it for the time being." The policeman was stunned and looked at Lily inexplicably. What was going on? Wasn't he a disabled person? Blind and fractured? However, the policeman immediately caught on to Lily's words and questioned her. "Didn't you say that he wasn't your boyfriend? It seems like your relationship isn't ordinary." When Lily heard that, she was speechless. Chapter 1187. Hearing that, Lily subconsciously looked at Ming's hand that had been beaten by her. Sure enough, the back of Ming's hand was green and red. It was hanging by his side, and his eyes were empty as he stood silently. Lily's heart ached when she saw that. Did I hit him? What a sin! But she immediately realized her subconscious reaction, and her heart immediately suppressed that feeling. Damn it! He was asking for it. Why should I feel sorry for him? Why doesn't anyone feel sorry for me? Hey, it's so late, and the weather is so cold. Don't be awkward. It's not easy for everyone. You quickly take her back and make it convenient for us. The police, okay? One of them said to Lily with a cold breath. Lily nodded. This coat is mine. One of the police officers pointed to Ming's cotton coat. It was very thin. Lily felt even more speechless. He simply signed the papers and reluctantly took the man away. Returning the jacket to the comrade, Lily looked at the dark purple satin pajamas that Ming was wearing. Her brows furrowed. Lily took off her long down jacket and draped it over him without another word. Unexpectedly, Ming reached out and finally said, "I'm not cold. You can wear it yourself." Bullsh *T. Lily rolled her eyes at him and slapped his hand away. "What nonsense are you talking to me for? F***ck. I'm so unlucky to have met you." What he said. The lips of the police officers behind her twitched, and they were speechless. Lily helped Ming put his shirt on. She let one of his hands go through the sleeves and covered him with the other. Then, she carefully zipped up his shirt and put his hat on. Ming was much taller than Lily. Originally, Lily was wearing a long down jacket that almost reached her ankles, but Ming only wore it to his knees. But this kind of equipment was enough to keep him warm. After checking to make sure it was airtight and warm, Lily took his hand and walked out. The police officers behind her watched and shook their heads. They sighed and said, "Women are not to be trifled with. My girlfriend is even more difficult to deal with. This brat is really something. If my girlfriend treated me like this, I would have quit long ago. I can't see, can I? How can I not lower my head when I'm under the eaves?" That's true. It's not easy for a blind man to find a girlfriend. How could he not think about her? All right, it's time to get off work. We can finally leave. As soon as she stepped out of the police station, Lily felt the cold wind blowing and shivered. Lily was only wearing a long sweater and a thin pair of leggings. In such a cold and windy night, this kind of equipment looked particularly thin. Shivering from the cold, Lily felt that this man was extremely hateful. He had nothing to do. Why did you have to find trouble for me? Lily held onto his hand. Her movements were not very gentle as she shouted, "Go down the stairs. Don't roll down." Unexpectedly, Ming pulled her over and said, "It's so cold. You're still cold dressed like this. Do you know what I'm dressed like?" Lily roared. Ming pulled her over and held her tightly in his arms. He said, "Then let's get warm together." Chapter 1188. At that moment, Lily was touched by his warm embrace. Her heart fluttered slightly. The familiar embrace, the familiar smell, and the familiar person. But it can't be like this. Lily was annoyed, pushed his hand away and shouted, "Are you F***king sick? Who do you think you are? Why are you hugging me? Disgusting. With that, she pushed Oming away. Oming's eyes were darker, and the street lights were reflected in his eyes. They were still empty and unfocused. Lily inadvertently turned her head and saw the man's loneliness at a glance. Pursing her lips, Lily stuffed his clothes back, pulled his sleeve and shouted, "Follow me down the stairs." Her tone was very bad, very bad. Even Lily herself felt that she was a little too fierce. However, a pair of eyes were staring at his feet, pulling him down step by step. Oming slowly followed her down the stairs. Just after he went down the stairs, he opened his clothes again and pulled her over. "It's so cold." Lily had long been shivering from the cold. Suddenly falling into a warm place, she felt comfortable. But clearly feeling the temperature of the man behind her, Lily felt a little uncomfortable. What does this mean? Didn't we break up? What does he mean by hugging me like this? But the weather is too cold, so it will be much more comfortable. Forget it. I can't freeze myself. Otherwise the loss will outweigh the gain. Lily muttered in her heart, took the blind man to the side of the road, and stopped a taxi. Now that Oming and Lily were in such an awkward relationship, it was certainly impossible to take this guy back to the hotel where she was staying. When she got in the car, she asked, "Did you bring your ID card?" Lily originally did not have any hope. After all, this guy not only had no money, but also no mobile phone or wallet. How could he bring his ID card? Unexpectedly, Oming really took out a white card. Resident ID card. Lily took the ID card closer to look, and it turned out to be Oming's ID card. Seeing this ID card, Lily was even more suspicious and asked, "What are you doing here?" Oming did not speak, but slowly unbuttoned his clothes, trying to take them off. Lily saw this, pressed his hand and asked fiercely, "What do you want to do?" "Take them off." One word, concise and comprehensive. However, the driver who was driving turned around and looked at them with a strange look. "Wear it. You idiot." Lily roughly helped him straighten his clothes and turned to the driver. "Let's go to a nearby hotel." The driver took a look and asked, "What kind of place are we going to?" "There are many hotels nearby." "Go to a better one for 5 stars. Lily's heart was bleeding. This type of hotel was extremely expensive. But Oming, this bastard, could he get used to staying in ordinary hotels? But after saying that, Lily suddenly felt that something was wrong. Why did she have to think for him? She must be crazy. She then said, "Let's go to a normal hotel." The driver nodded and stopped at a traffic light. It looked very magnificent. Sure enough, Lily saw the big signboard at a glance. Sheraton Resort Hotel, F*CK. A 5-star hotel. Chapter 1189. But the arrow was already on the string, and Lily was too cold to speak. She grabbed Oming's clothes and walked inside. She went to the front desk and checked into a room. Lily took out Oming's ID card and slapped it on the counter. "One room. Okay, please show me your ID card." The receptionist smiled politely. "I'm not staying here. He's staying alone. I'll send him up later." "Okay." The receptionist took Oming's ID card and was about to complete the formalities when she heard Oming say, "I'm not staying." Lily said, "Ignore him. I'll pay." Oming pulled her. His eyes were empty and unfocused. He said coldly, "I'm hungry." "None of my business." Lily took his hand away. After Oming let go, he grabbed her again and said, "My last meal was yesterday at noon." In other words, he hadn't eaten anything since yesterday's dinner, and the whole day. Even a man of iron wouldn't be able to bear such hunger. Moreover, Oming's stomach wasn't good. No wonder he had lost so much weight. His mental state didn't seem very good. Lily felt sorry for him, but she scolded him fiercely. "Can't you F*King behave when you're blind? Can't you just be a quiet blind man and be obedient? You're crazy." Oming didn't say anything. He tightened his grip on Lily's hand. The heat from his palm seemed to penetrate deep into her soul. Lily pushed his hand away and asked the receptionist, "Do you have food and beverages in your hotel?" "Yes, our kitchen provides 24-hour food and beverage service." "That's good. Ask him what he wants to eat later. Give him a single room, He's staying alone. Okay. Wait a moment. I can't stay. Oming pulled her hard and shouted at the receptionist, "Give me back my ID card." "Is it your turn to speak?" Lily gave him a shove. "I'll call your mother to pick you up later. You better behave yourself." Oming seemed to be throwing a tantrum. He pulled her hard and said, "I can't stay. Don't call me that. I don't want my ID card anymore. Let's go." "You're crazy." Lily was furious. She pushed his hand away and shouted, "I think you are not only blind, but also have a problem with your brain. I'm paying for you to stay in a 5-star hotel, and you're still acting like this? You should just stay here and calm down. I won't accompany you anymore." With that, she flung Oming's hand away. However, although it was only a single hand, its strength was shockingly great. Lily tried several times, but she couldn't let go of his hand. She shouted helplessly, "Let go!" Oming pursed his lips and didn't say anything. As if sensing that Lily was really angry, he cautiously said, "Shall we eat first?" Lily closed her eyes and gritted her teeth in anger. Oming didn't seem to notice her anger and added, "I want to eat hot pot." Hot pot. In this kind of cold weather, eating hot pot was the best. Lily was tempted by his words, but then she became suspicious. "I thought you didn't like hot pot." "Now I do," Oming said calmly. Lily glared at him and said, "Then let's get a room first. After eating we can come and stay." Chapter 1190. Damn you. Lily slapped the back of his hand. "Do you have any shame? Do you know who I am? Let me ask you, does your face hurt?" How could he not know? But he just wanted to be with her. He really wanted to be with her. He thought of sneaking out, and didn't even have time to change his clothes. When he heard that she was here, he used all the money in his wallet to get someone to bring her here. Who knew after coming here? He had no idea where she was, and he couldn't find her. He could only stay at the police station, and let the police help him. Hearing what she said, Oming shut his mouth. He grabbed her hand and said, "Let's eat first. I'm starving." "Miss, do you want to stay here?" the receptionist asked. "No. Stop," the two of them said in unison. Lily turned her head and glared at him, but he just stared blankly ahead without much expression on his face. "Are you staying or not?" The receptionist was also driven crazy by the two of them, and asked helplessly. Lily face-bombed. "Let's open it first. If you don't live with me, I won't live with you." Oming's voice was indifferent, but the words he said made it sound like he was angry with Lily. When Lily heard that, she was both angry and amused. She glared at him and asked, "If you don't want to stay, you'll sleep on the bridge?" Oming answered without hesitation, "That's fine too." "You're crazy." Lily waved her hand. "Then go sleep on the bridge. Just think of it as me being bitten by a dog out of kindness. Most importantly, this dog was insatiable. You're scolding me." Oming sounded a little aggrieved. "I'm so hungry that I don't have any energy." Lily really felt that her temper was off the charts. She looked down at her arm that was held tightly. No matter how she looked at it, this guy didn't look like he was hungry and had no strength. But in the end he couldn't let it go. After giving the receptionist an apologetic smile, he took Oming's ID card back. Cold. Outside, Lily was so cold that she doubted her life. She brought Oming to a restaurant that was still open, but they didn't eat hot pot. Lily ordered hot soup and desserts. She also ordered some light dishes and let him eat by himself. Oming couldn't see, and he could only move one hand. At this moment, he was holding the chopsticks in his hand, so he had to fumble around to get the rice in his bowl. Lily ignored him. After eating her dessert, she leaned back in her seat and took out her cell phone. When she picked it up, she realized that Yi Qianqian had called her several times. She didn't know when the phone had been set to silent, but it didn't even vibrate. As soon as she picked it up, Lily replied to her WeChat message, telling her that a friend had asked her out, and that she was having supper. He took a picture and sent it over. Yi Qianqian immediately sent him the middle finger. After drinking a bowl of soup and eating a few mouthfuls of rice, Oming put down his chopsticks. Lily was playing with her phone, but when he put down his chopsticks, She immediately noticed. He glanced at her and asked casually, "Are you full?" Oming's expression was the same as usual as he said, "Plain rice, tasteless. There's food in front of you." They were all Oming's favorite dishes, and they were all exquisitely prepared. Oming's eyes were unfocused. He looked ahead and said calmly, "I can't see it." Chapter 1191. Lily's tone was very harsh and full of disgust. When Oming heard that, his expression was still indifferent, and his eyes were empty. He said, "In that case I'll look like a fool." "You're not a fool. You're blind." Lily put down her phone and put her hands on the table. She said seriously, "This privilege is not only for fools. Blind people can also have it, so you can rest assured." Oming's lips were tightened, and his hands were hanging by his side. He asked, "Can't you feed me?" When Lily heard that, she laughed out loud as if she had heard a joke. She asked, "Feed you? I invited you to dinner and let you stay in a hotel because of our past relationship. Mr. O, don't push your luck. Otherwise, you'll really have to sleep on the street today." "Then I'll sleep on the street," Oming said as if he had accepted his fate. He looked at Lily and asked, "Will you accompany me?" Lily heard that and smiled coldly. She looked away and looked out the window. It was very late, but as the busiest area in the area, there were still a lot of people coming and going. The street lights illuminated many people. On the side of the road, a homeless man could be clearly seen lying in front of a closed shop. "You're down and out, but I'm not. Why should I accompany you?" Lily's voice was indescribably cold. She looked out the window and curled her lips cruelly. She said, "In your current situation, how are you like the Oming of the past? You have no money, you're blind, and you're disabled. You still want me to serve you? Why?" Oming's hands were hanging by his side, and he slightly tightened. His lips were tightened, and his eyes blinked twice, but they were still unfocused and empty. There was no brilliance of the past, no brilliance of the past. In the words of you and your mother, "I'm with you because of your money, your beauty, and your power. You're blind now, and it's only a matter of time before your family's company fails. I'm not interested in wasting time with you." Lily's eyes gradually turned red as she said that. "That's right." Lowering her head slightly, Lily picked up the teacup and drank 2 mouthfuls. However, when the water entered his throat, it was as if his eyes were being burned. Lily's eyes began to burn uncontrollably, and tears welled up in her eyes silently. Oming narrowed his eyes slightly and said with certainty, "You're not that kind of person." "I am," Lily replied without hesitation. She snorted coldly and ran her fingers through the stray strands of hair on her cheek. Her voice was arrogant and full of pride as she said, "I've been one for a long time. You've already seen through me, haven't you?" His voice was calm and composed, but the watery light couldn't help but spread out. Lily wiped her eyes and laughed at herself. Fortunately, Oming couldn't see it. Otherwise it would be awkward. She was the one who dumped him, so why was she the one crying? She doesn't like you at all. She just lacks someone to serve her wholeheartedly. You can't just throw yourself at her for nothing. How despicable. When he needs you, you are whatever you say. When he doesn't need you anymore, what do you say you are? Chapter 1192. However, Oming sat in his seat and didn't move. Lily stood opposite him and looked down at him. The man in front of her was wearing a long down jacket that didn't suit him. One of his hands was hung around his neck, and his lips were tightly pursed. He looked serious. At that moment, he seemed to have heard Lily's words, and his face became even more tense. "I'm hungry," Oming said with a straight face. "Then eat." Lily sat down and looked at the man in front of her. She had no intention of going up to feed him. "I'll wait for you for 10 minutes. Are you in a hurry?" "Yes," Lily said with her eyes wide open. "Then I won't eat. Let's go." Oming stood up and groped his way out of his seat. When Lily saw that, she was shocked and quickly asked, "Aren't you still hungry? Aren't you in a hurry?" Oming asked. "I'm in a hurry, and you eat your meal. That's not a conflict, right?" When Oming heard that, he calmly said, "You don't have time to feed me. I can't eat by myself." Lily was speechless. He's actually so self-righteous. Should I be the one to feed him? She should be the one to owe him? Lily laughed angrily. Ming, how can you be so shameless? When Ming heard that, he didn't continue the conversation and said, let's go. When Lily heard that, she looked at the exquisite dishes on the table and said regretfully, there are so many dishes, and you haven't even touched a single chopstick. What a waste. Ming stopped in his tracks and turned his head to look at Lily's face. The eyes of the man in front of her were empty and without focus. There was no light in them. Inexplicably, when Lily met his eyes, she felt a little guilty. She knew that he couldn't see, but she felt as if she had been seen through. Annoyed, Lily sat down and picked up her chopsticks. She picked up some food and put it in her bowl. As she ate, she mumbled, damn be ****. I ordered so much food for nothing. Lily buried herself in the work. In a place where she couldn't see, Ming's lips quietly raised, but it was fleeting, leaving no trace. Ming fumbled around and sat down again. He sat quietly. When Lily saw this, she was even more furious with this guy. She stepped forward and roughly grabbed his hand, stuffing a spoon into his palm. Then, she put some food into his bowl with her chopsticks and said, eat it yourself. Ming put the spoon aside, spread out his palm, and said calmly, I want chopsticks. Lily gritted her teeth. She picked up the chopsticks and shoved them into his hand. Ming slowly ate the food in his bowl. His movements were slow, but his chopsticks never missed. He ate for more than 10 minutes. Lily continued to put food in his bowl several times before Ming slowly stopped. Seeing that he was almost done, Lily called for the bill. As soon as she said that, Ming said, I want to eat ice cream. He added, chocolate-flavored. Lily glared at him and said fiercely, eat until you die. Although that was what she said, she still asked the waiter to bring an ice cream over. After paying the bill, Ming couldn't hold the ice cream because his hands were injured. Therefore, the heavy responsibility naturally fell on Lily's hands. Chapter 1193. It was very fragrant and sweet. Lily liked ice cream, especially vanilla and chocolate-flavored ice cream. Lily used the spoon to scoop up the ice cream and put it into her mouth. She blinked and pulled Ming's arm to hold hers. Then they walked out. Ming's footsteps staggered, but he quickly steadied himself and followed Lily out. As soon as they got out, the freezing cold feeling came back again. Lily held the ice cream in her hand. As she ate it, she shivered and gasped for air. Ming seemed to sense something. He tightened his grip on Lily's arm and asked, where's my ice cream? Why are you eating ice cream in such cold weather? I'll throw it away if my hand freezes. Lily lied through her teeth as she walked out. Anyway, he couldn't see, and he wasn't the one paying. Lily didn't feel guilty at all for lying to a blind man. However, Lily didn't notice that the moment she said that, Ming's eyes flashed with a smile. Liar. It's true. Lily restrained herself a little and put her hand down. Why are you eating ice cream in such cold weather? You didn't take it with you. You deserve to be thrown away. Liar. Ming repeated this sentence and reached out to touch Lily's hand. Lily quickly put the spoon in the ice cream bowl and let him touch her hand. At that moment, Lily didn't feel guilty at all. She said impatiently, I said I didn't. Are you afraid that I'll take it for myself? Ming's lips seemed to curve as he said, you're very likely to do such a thing. I'm not that kind of person. You are. Lily glared at him and pushed him. Do you mean that I'm lying to a blind man? Am I such a heartless person? With that, she subconsciously hid the ice cream behind her back. It's up to you whether you believe me or not. Let go. Ming's lips curved, but then he returned to his original state. With some regret, he said, I haven't tried eating ice cream after a meal. That was Lily's old habit. She had gradually changed it. Hearing Ming's words, Lily suddenly felt guilty. But so what? The blind man needed someone to serve him. Did he want her to feed him ice cream? Dream on. In her heart, Lily scooped a bigger mouthful of ice cream and stuffed it into her mouth. When she turned around and saw Ming's regretful and aggrieved expression, she felt even more pleased. Serves you right. Lily brought the blind man back to the five-star hotel. She took out his identity card and gave it to the receptionist. A single room. I said, if you don't live with me, I won't live with you. Oming repeated what he had said countless times. I can't see anything by myself. I'll be scared. When Oming said this, there was a hint of bitterness in his voice. In the ears of others, it sounded even more like Lily had abandoned him. Lily was speechless. She took out her ID card and said, I'm staying here too. Let's get a king-sized room. Okay. The receptionist smiled and looked at Oming, and then at Lily with a smile on her face. After registering and paying, Lily led the blind man to find a room. Chapter 1194. Lily glanced sideways at his tightly clenched fists and her eyes darkened. She turned her head away and looked straight ahead. The phone vibrated slightly, and Lily picked it up. It was a message from Shenjilia. Shenjilia, where are you going to meet your friends so late at night? Do you want me to pick you up? Lily held the message in her hand and looked at the line of words. She knew it was Yi Chanqian who had told him. After thinking about it, Lily replied, No, I'll go back later. Shenjilia replied quickly, It's so late. It's not safe for you to be alone. I'll pick you up. Where are you? Lily frowned and replied with a bitter face, It's really not necessary. I'll go back later. I'll tell you when I get there. It won't take long. Oming's arms slightly tightened, and his voice was a little low as he asked, Not yet? Is it that far? Only then did Lily raise her head, look around, and find that they had arrived. She took out the key card and opened the door. After pulling Oming in, the phone rang again. Shenjilia. Well, you have to be careful when you're alone. Try to go to a crowded place. Lily's heart warmed, and her face unconsciously softened. She sent an emoji that said, Brother, what time is it? How can there be a crowded place? Shenjilia. Shenjilia, that's not good. I must go and bring you back. Where are you? Lily sent another emoji that said she didn't look, and then didn't reply. Oming stood behind her the whole time. He didn't move, nor did he speak. Lily glanced at him and pulled him to the bed. She let his hand touch the edge of the bed and said, This is the bed. Then she took him to the bathroom and counted the steps. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps. 10 steps, this is the bathroom. Yeah. Oming responded faintly and said, I want to go to the bathroom. Go ahead. Lily opened the door to the bathroom for him and pushed him in. Take care of it yourself. However, just as Lily was about to shake his hand off and leave, she was pulled back by his large palm. He asked, You're not going to help me? Please, do you need help to go to the bathroom? Don't you know how to take off your own pants? Lily rolled her eyes at him and flung his hand away. But before she could shake him off, he yanked her forcefully and pressed her against the bathroom door. He held her palm with one hand and placed it in front of her chest. His body weight firmly pressed her down. Lily was shocked. Caught off guard, Oming's knee was already in between her legs. His face was less than 2 centimeters away from hers. Such a sudden scene made Lily inexplicably feel suffocated. Subconsciously, she wanted to push him away. Lily frowned and was about to yell at him. Suddenly, he lowered his head and sealed her lips. Without any explanation, he went straight into her mouth. His movements were domineering and wild, with some inexplicable fierceness. He sucked her tongue with a bit of punishment. Hot breaths intertwined with each other, and the temperature of the space between their bodies climbed inch by inch. Lily was even more furious, and her sense of humiliation was rising. This bastard, what did he take me for? Chapter 1195. No, maybe he's not even as good as a whore. Even if he's a whore, he should have dignity and integrity. A woman like me might just be a plaything in his heart. When he was happy, he would give her some sweets, coax her to say that he would marry her, and tell her that he would love her deeply. When he was unhappy, he would immediately show his true colors. Just like his mother, he guarded his own land, for fear that others would covet it. As long as she got a little closer, they would be like hedgehogs. hurting people who tried to invade. Such a man, who could afford to have him? His kiss was getting deeper and deeper, heavily and deeply. In the past, Lily would have given him a happy reaction. But now, Lily's heart was only left with pain. As the kiss deepened, the pain became more and more hysterical. Her remaining hand pressed against his stomach. Lily pushed him away, and her breathing became more and more heavy. Oming released her lips, but his hand didn't move. He sighed and said, "The taste of ice cream." Lily's eyes were even more hot. She pushed him away, raised her hand, and slapped his face hard. But at the moment when it was about to fall, Lily stopped her hand in midair. In front of her, Oming's eyes were empty and unfocused. He just looked forward, as if he knew nothing about what was happening. Her hand was suspended in midair, but in the end it didn't fall. Lily bit her lip, sneered, and pushed him away. She said sarcastically, "Since you are so hungry, why don't I help you find a special service?" When Oming heard that, his face darkened. He reached out with one hand to pull her, but Lily avoided it. Lily glanced at his hand and sneered, "Do your parents know that you can still be so evil when you are blind?" Then she turned and walked straight to the door. But before she had time to open the door, she heard rapid footsteps behind her. Oming seemed to want to grab her hand, but he miscalculated. As a result, he grabbed the sweater behind her with one hand. But it was such a grab that Oming's mood obviously calmed down, and he shouted, "You Lily." With her back to him, Lily looked at him coldly, and stopped to pull his hand away. However, Oming's grip became tighter and tighter. He tugged at her clothes and walked toward her. Lily straightened her back, and pretended to be calm, as she turned to look at the man behind her. There was no light in his eyes, nor was there any trace of his usual pride. Oming was like a child who was dependent on an adult. Oming grabbed her sweater and begged helplessly, "Don't go." Lily's heart shook. It was like a giant metal bell in the wind, and Rain was suddenly struck by lightning. The big bell suddenly made a huge noise, causing her heart to feel numb and sore. Unable to maintain the expression on her face, Lily's eyes became dry, and tears began to flow. But then, Lily immediately reacted. He wiped his eyes with his hand and tried to sound normal. His voice was cold as he said, "Mr. O, I only have one piece of clothing. Please leave one for me. It's very cold outside." But Oming didn't let go. He begged, "Then stay, don't go." Chapter 1196. Lily's voice was stiff as she looked down at his hand. She tried to sound calm and said, "Since we've broken up, I don't intend to be entangled with you anymore. If the police hadn't asked me to take you away, I wouldn't have bothered with such a troublesome person like you. Please let go, Mr. O." But Oming didn't speak. He silently grabbed her clothes and pulled them tighter. Lily pursed her lips, and her voice was a little hoarse. She chuckled and said, "It seems that you really want me to run around naked." As she said that, she started to lift her clothes. Oming didn't expect Lily to do that. He shouted, Lily, what are you doing?" Lily ignored him. She lifted her clothes and quickly took them off. The cold air suddenly hit her, and she was so cold that she couldn't breathe. Wearing only her underwear, Lily's footsteps were loud as she walked toward the door. Oming couldn't stand it anymore. He held her sweater tighter and tighter. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "Wait a minute." Lily stopped and turned to look at him. She only had a bra on her upper body, and thin black pencil pants on her lower body. What was the difference between going out like this and running naked? Oming gritted his teeth, and threw the sweater in front of him. "You can go." Then he seemed to remember something, and reached for the zipper of the jacket. "And this, I'll give it back to you." Oming took off his jacket, and tossed it in front of him. Then he turned around, and carefully felt his way toward the bed. Seeing Oming like that, Lily took a deep breath. Looking at his back, she finally picked up the sweater, put it on and walked out. The door closed with a soft creak. Oming sat on the bed, and his eyes were red and blank. As Lily walked out, she searched for her contacts on her phone. She found Xiao Ziqing's number and dialed it. Sure enough, it couldn't be reached. Even Oming's cell phone had blocked her cell phone number, let alone her own cell phone. The extent to which Qiao Ziqing disliked her was deeper than Yu Lily had imagined. Yu Lily smiled bitterly and went out to find a public phone to call Qiao Ziqing. It was past midnight, but when the call was made, the other side was not asleep yet. She sounded very energetic, but Qiao Ziqing sounded a little tired. "Hello, how are you?" "Hello, Mrs. O." Qiao Ziqing was clearly taken aback when she heard the voice. "I'm Yu Lily." Yu Lily knew that she definitely knew who she was, so she quickly cut to the chase and said, "I'm currently in XX City in Fujian Province. Your son ran around here today and was taken to the police station. I later brought him out and settled him in a hotel." After telling him the name of the hotel and the room number, Yu Lily cut to the chase and said, "You don't have to thank me too much. Take him away quickly. In the future, please keep your son in check and don't let him pester me again." Qiao Ziqing held the phone in her hand. She was so emotional that tears finally rolled down her cheeks. She shouted, "What do you mean by this? My son was doing fine at home. Why did he suddenly run off to Fujian? You must have brought him there, right?" You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.